Yeah.
Yes.
All righty, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our May 10th combination IRC and IFC tag meeting. We're here today to discuss some stuff for the family home child care provisions in the IRC and IFC. And later on in the day, we have some a different proposal that's just for the IFC to talk about. So at that point, I was, is Micah in the room today?
I see him.
I was hoping that he would be willing to chair for the first half of this meeting, and then after we break out for the IFC only, I was hoping Tony would take over chairing this meeting for us.
I second that motion.
You don't want to just do it all, Tony? I'm telling you.
I just figure people get sick of hearing me.
I don't think you talk near as much as I do, but all right. Yeah, no problem, Dustin. Just let me know when you want me to start, and I'll go from there.
All right, I'll go ahead and take a roll call of both the IRC and IFC tags, and I'll start with the residential. So Micah, you are here. Annie O'Rourke. Jennifer Elliott.
Here.
Quinn Tai. Darren Graham. Todd Short.
Here.
Ron Perkowitz.
Here.
Darren Watkins. Michelle Yee. And Damon Doyle. All right, so we have 4. We don't have a quorum. I'll come back and do a further roll call and check the participants list here in just a little bit. Starting off with the fire tag. Tony Doan, I heard you here. Zach Tuck. Another call for Quinn Tai. Corey Thomas. Ken Brulette.
Present.
Mike Six. Dave Kokop.
Here.
Chris Seaman.
Here.
Ricky Campbell.
Here.
Roger Herringa.
Here.
Kevin Marr. Paul Clark.
Here.
And let's see. So we do have a quorum of the fire tag at the moment. And I will turn it over to Micah, and I guess we can't take official action if we want to do any voting with the IRC tag, but we can do discussion on our topics today.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dustin. Thanks, everybody, for being here, and a strong showing by the fire code tag. So we do want to do welcome and introductions. So my name is Micah Chappelle. I'm the Technical Code Development Manager for Seattle's Department of Construction and Inspections. I represent code officials on the SBCC, and I would like to, I guess we'll move into the public introductions. If anyone from the public would like to introduce themselves, since we've already done roll call of both the IFC and IRC tags, that would be great. So please raise your hand or unmute and be recognized, please. Ardell.
Hi, my name's Ardell Jalla. I'm the building official for SDCI. Representing SDCI, I don't represent SFD or any other departments within the city of Seattle. Thanks.
Tyler.
Good morning. My name is Tyler Farmer. I'm also fighting a cold, so I apologize for my scratchy voice, but I'm with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. I'm the Strategic Planning Program Manager, here to talk about all things related to childcare, family home provider in the building code. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tyler. Karen and Aaron. Aaron, I think had her hand up first.
Hi, thank you for having us. My name is Erin Hike. I am with SEIU 925. We are a statewide union, including family home childcare providers.
And I'm Karen Christensen. I'm an area administrator with the Department of Children, Youth and Families. I'm also the sort of facilitator for the waiver process group that looks at family home capacity increase waivers. So glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. I will go ahead and go to the next person. Last name Grant. I won't butcher your first name.
Anjali Grant. I'm an architect in Seattle. I do a lot of childcare, and I'm here just to provide a practitioner's perspective. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Any other folks from the public? Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I don't see any other hands raised, and I was gonna kind of introduce the family home childcare topic a little bit. And at our last tag meeting, we discussed some of the proposed language that we had. But one of the things that was left out for a presentation to the tag members was a presentation by DCYF on what they've got going on and kind of how they are amending their WACs and supporting life, health, and safety through their provisions as well. And so I've got several documents that I uploaded to the website for use today. I've got some of the proposed language. I've got some affected language through the IBC, IRC, and IFC. And then I have a little diagram that Anjali put together that kind of details childcare size limits without sprinklers in residential and commercial. And then I think the one that I would maybe propose we start with is the draft WAC 1110 from DCYF. If that sounds good to DCYF and the tag members.
That sounds good to DCYF.
All right, then I will open that up, and if you want me to move it around, just let me know and I will navigate the document. I don't have any way to edit this, but I think this is you guys' document. If we need to make some notes on it, you guys would be the ones editing this document.
Excellent. And I actually wanted to give a little bit of background before we jump into the waiver. As part of your introduction, Dustin, as a representative of DCYF, I will be the first to acknowledge we are not building code officials. We are not fire code officials. And so we're really excited to be here with a bunch of people who know this work inside and out. But what I did want to touch on is kind of how we got here and why we're here now. And just sort of give this group insight into what the childcare world looks like now and recently. Basically, we're here because some of you may know that the childcare world is frankly in crisis. There's just not enough supply for the demand to meet high quality, safe early learning and childcare programs. And this is an issue that DCYF has been working on for years. Aaron Hike, the representative for SEIU, has been working on for years. And the legislature recently recognized in 2021 specifically, they passed the Fair Start for Kids Act, which had a whole host of provisions to try and expand high quality, safe childcare in the state to get more availability out there for parents. And one of those features was this waiver capacity that you're going to hear a lot about, where historically the statutes have limited family home childcare to 12 kids, full stop. That has never been able to go above that. And with this bill in 2021, the legislature said DCYF can actually waive this limit. It did not put a cap on this limit, so long as DCYF develops criteria that anybody who earns one of these waivers shall meet. So that bill went into effect in the summer of 2021, and we convened a work group to develop this criteria. What basically answering the question, what extra things must a provider do in a family home childcare to run a high quality, safe program with more than 12 children? So DCYF did convene a work group, and working with childcare providers, working internally, we created this list that is now codified in our WAC, and I can throw that WAC citation here if anybody wants to look at it. But it's actually, frankly, the one right in front of you. So that section was promulgated and went into effect in February 2022. So we have been working under these requirements for just over a year now. And what we learned is this is meeting a need. There have been a number of programs around the state that have applied for this. A lot of programs are absolutely interested in providing more than 12 children in their family home childcare. A lot of programs are stepping up and saying, yeah, we can meet these extra requirements so long as we can provide care for more kids. But as part of this, with operating for a year, we realized there's some fine tuning we can do. We can improve health and safety within our own code to ensure still a higher quality program. Safety for us looks different than safety for the members of this group, I believe. Safety for us, the absolute cornerstone is having a good ratio and having a good number of providers there per number of kids. And that number changes based on how many children can walk, how many can't walk, the ages of the children, etc. So that's how our approach has been to these waiver requirements, to these waiver updates that are proposed in the document in front of you. And as part of this project, what we did is we reached out to building code officials, to fire officials around the state to help us learn more about what we came across as what we're calling the magic number. We learned that if you have 12 kids, as soon as you add a 13th kid, your house crosses that magic number, and you are required as a homeowner to move from the residential code into the building code and meet those requirements. And our concern, as you might know, is how onerous that might be on a family program who are all operating on shoestring budgets. And so a large part of what we did with this work group, many of the members are here today, including building officials, fire officials, a child care representative, architect. We've put in a ton of work to try and figure out ways that we can enhance safety while still allowing flexibility with providers by implementing low cost requirements if they choose to pursue one of these waivers. So that's the background, that's the history, that's our perspective. I'll hand it off to Karen first, just if she has any follow-up, and then I think Erin, she was gonna ask you to speak on your perspective.
Thank you, Tyler. I just wanted to throw out a few numbers. And they are, like Tyler said, we've been working with the waivers, capacity waiver requests for over a year. We have been on pause with that for about a month because of all of just the discussion about what is really safe for kids and where are we going to go with this work group and with all of your help. So we paused it a little bit, but in general, I want to give you a few numbers. The total capacity, so the total extra slots of children that have been approved is right around 1,400 in the last year. So that's quite a few seats for children. And I think it's been helpful. And then the total number of waivers that we have approved is 80. They range from 13 children through 35 children, which is, I will just share transparently that when the department gets a request for 35 children, we all kind of cringe. And so we're trying to really work together with all of you and our work group to make that number something that's safe. The average capacity of all the things that have been approved is 17. And then the most frequent capacity that's approved is 16. So they're really, for the most part, not asking for a lot more children, but it really is has been helping the childcare in Washington. And then I want to move it over to Aaron so you can really talk about that because you work with providers a lot.
Sure, and I'll try not to duplicate what Tyler said because he covered a lot of things. He mentioned that there is a shortage of childcare in the state, and it's actually a recent study from Commerce says there's about 500,000 slots, or 500,000 kids don't have access to licensed care in this state. And so we know just by logical thinking that if parents don't have a licensed slot to put their kid in during the day, they're going to have to do something. And that may be somebody stays home and that person is no longer active in the workforce, or they're going to go to what we call the gray market, unlicensed care. There's none of those, licensing requirements around healthcare and staffing that DCYF covers. DCYF does unannounced regular licensing visits, which, to make sure that the standards are being followed, and none of that is happening in the gray market. So it is both an issue of, people being able to go to work and, earn the money to care for their families, and also just like basic safety for kiddos. I would also say our members, unfortunately, are very low income folks who are running very small businesses on incredibly tight margins. And it is, as someone who works in the labor movement and wants everyone to have good jobs with good benefits, that's really frustrating. But that is the status of our members in childcare right now. And so I know I wasn't able to be at the last meeting of this group, but our work group has tried really hard to address life safety concerns in a way that is financially feasible for very small businesses with very low margins to actually meet, so that we can maintain the slots that are already out there. We can support the families that are accessing those slots. And then also we can make sure that providers are able to offer these additional slots without, bankrupting their businesses. And so that is a huge priority for our union around addressing the childcare crisis generally and in a way that is financially feasible for our members.
Okay. Hand went up from Ardell. I was just going to ask if there's anybody that wanted to ask questions or discuss further, and public. So go ahead, Ardell.
Hi, again, my name is Ardell Jella. I'm building official for SDCI, and I raised this to the SBCC back in 22, because of this disconnect. We were getting from our Department of Education and Early Learning notified that there's these requests for capacity waivers, and they were seeking funding through the city. And so this is what raised it up to us. So I want to remind you, under the residential code, we don't always get permits for these. Yes, there are provisions within the residential code for family home childcare, but we weren't seeing them. We weren't seeing permits for them. And so I'm going to ask, as you hear the discussion today, to think about how these are currently enforced and the potential changes to enforcement to get a permit, to have them come in, to have them be in a licensed childcare facility, that building officials and fire officials get to see the facility and review it under a permit for a family home childcare that is permitted for the waiver. And I think that's something to keep in mind. I had requests for them and said, no, this doesn't fall under the residential code. This falls under the building code when you go above 12. And so I hear the providers and the DCYF need to provide this increase in childcare capacity, but still remain within the residential code. And so that is the goal of all of this combined changes to both the residential code and to the licensing side, that with both of those, with the staffing, with the plumbing requirements, with all of those things that exist within the licensing requirements, in addition to what we see in the building code, in the residential code, to look at that holistically as providing a level of safety, and that the building officials and fire officials get to see a permit and get to see the facilities where currently we might not see them. So that please keep that in mind as we continue discussions.
Thank you, Ardell. Anjali, that's how you pronounce that. I apologize.
Yeah, I just wanted to share my experience. I've had 2 recent projects in the Seattle region that were residential to commercial conversions for childcare. One of them was 1 classroom, one of them was 2 classrooms. They were about $1.5 million per project. These are small single family homes, just to give you a sense of what that shift is for a provider. Thanks.
I just wanted to add to thank Anjali and Ardell for their comments, and Aaron, of course. They have worked so incredibly closely with our department and with the other members of the work group. We already, and I think they found this in our requirements, have embedded some safety requirements, like she was talking about toileting and plumbing and fire safety, into our WAC. And the piece about the cities not seeing them is it's very messy, because some cities will go and make a visit to a family home provider, but most don't. So they're becoming aware of these things by chance and sometimes in not great circumstances. So the work group has done a lot of work about potentially asking that a construction permit, I don't know what it's called, but I think that's what it is, be required, so that before they request the waiver for more children, we know then that the city has been involved and approves it. So there's just been a lot of work done behind the scenes, and you're very welcome to ask us questions about those as we go on.
Okay, thank you very much. I definitely want to open up to tag members, both IFC and IRC tag members, to start asking some questions if you have them. I do have some starting out, if that's okay, for the group. And my first question would be, is this solely a Washington issue? I'm assuming it's not, but we're only dealing with Washington, I guess. My question kind of relates to Washington already exceeds the national standard for allowing 12 children to come out of the residential code. The current national standard is 6 children, and that triggers the requirements of the IBC and kicks you out of the IRC at that point. And so we allow 12 already. So we've already doubled the national standard. And so now we're being asked, based on a need, to increase the numbers of childcare providers by allowing an increase in children in a home again, when we already did that before. So one of my follow-up questions is, what data are you folks using to, ensure that we're not way beyond the national standard? And since we are, doubling it already, and now you want to go, you just indicated there's waivers of 35 kids in a residential home, which it is, I know some people have great concern with that, based on national standards. So if we're that far over national standards, what data are you providing to this group that would say, yeah, this is safe and it's not an issue, and we don't need to increase any additional standards to do this? And if you have any answers for that, that'd be great. And then we'll open up to the rest of the group.
Tyler, I would love for you to sort of talk about if you have any information about the 12. I think it goes way, very way back. And so Micah, in answer, I don't know about the national stuff. I just know I've been here 20 years and it's been 12, so I don't know where it came from. We also have concerns about there being so many children in a family home childcare, which is really why we're here, because we want to be able to say that we've worked with all of you, that we've worked with the work group to find a number that and a method for that number to be safe. So we don't want there to be 35 children in a family home. I think probably everybody can agree that that's a center, childcare center. So I don't have the data. Tyler, if you want to speak any more to it, if you have anything else, then feel free.
I'll let Dustin, I'll go after Dustin. You're on mute,
Muted,
Dustin.
Dustin.
Thank you for letting me know. I was going to go on a tirade. But I wanted to let everybody know that there is an appendix available in the back of the IRC for adoption by local jurisdictions. I'm not sure if the SBCC would allow adoption of that. I believe it would have to be approved for adoption if they were going to do it. But there are some requirements in the back of the IRC that allow for more than 5 children in a residential structure. So there's some of these align a little bit with what we have in the state amendment. But most of this, I feel like the state amendment is kind of an amalgam of some of the IBC, e-occupancy and I-4 occupancy, and this appendix kind of put together. I don't know if that's where it came from, but that's kind of how, if you were to split everything apart, you see requirements from these 3 sections, some the similar verbiage in all of these sections. And that's kind of where we're at today. And as far as like the history, like it's been a difficult research task to find out why it was increased from 5 in the model code language, and then we have 6 as a number in our amendment, and then up to 12 is another number in our amendment. And so I just wanted to point out that there is an appendix in the IRC that could be used if it was allowed by the SBCC.
Awesome. Thanks, Dustin. Oh, I see another question.
Hi, my name is Jenny Luke, and I'm a building plans examiner with the City of Bellevue. Does the state operate any childcare centers?
Sorry, no.
No. Are there grants or any funding available for these home operators to potentially move to a commercial facility?
There have been a lot of COVID grants, and other than small business grants, I don't know that there is anything specific that's going to help them move to a center.
Broadly, what the capital grant projects are can be divided into expanding capacity. So building a new center, building a new, a new wing of a center to add slots, or some minor renovations grants that have been largely for, like replacing a toilet, putting in a ventilation in a kitchen. And because the capacity expansion grants are competitive, family home providers are largely not actually competitive, because we're talking about, like an increase of slots of like 4 or 6 versus 20 or 30. And then just functionally, they have not been successful.
Thanks. I guess I'm just curious, if there are other avenues besides this specific proposal that would help, increase childcare available in the state. There's also a somewhat similar facility, adult family homes. And, I review a lot of these, and it seems like the process there is pretty good. From what I understand, that the license is not given until the building inspection receives a final approval. So there's good plan review, there's the inspection process. I think that's a missing piece here, even as it stands today, let alone if there's an increase. That process, I think, should be similar, and would help a lot with the issue that Ardell brought up of, you know, a lot of these are happening without our knowledge. So just wanted to bring that up.
And that is being proposed here, Jen.
Great.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Chris?
There we go, found it. I think I might have a different perspective since I've worked for fire departments and building departments. In Tacoma, our fire inspectors do get called out to these facilities. I don't believe we get called out to all of them, but it does seem like we do have a touch on them for an inspection opportunity. I think Ardell brings up a good point about the life safety people getting eyes on a facility to make sure that it meets the standards we're trying to outline. And I might offer that a fire operational permit may be an appropriate way to do it. If there's no construction going on, it's tough to say you need a building permit, especially the way the IRC works. It's not like a change of use because that doesn't really exist in the IRC. So a fire operational permit may be a good avenue for that. And then I might be getting ahead of us, but to Micah's point about, you know, safety and the number of people in a building and risk. One of the things I don't see addressed in there, and it's something that single family homes perform well in earthquakes, but that is another consideration that the building code uses when we have higher occupancy buildings or buildings containing people that the code protects more, like hospitals, schools. The seismic considerations change as we increase the occupant load. So that may be something we want to consider as we talk about more children in a facility.
Thanks, Chris. Majali?
I just wanted to note I'm working with a family provider who did get some funding for upgrades. And one of the things that's challenging, well, the grant limits for family home care are much lower. This is city funding. And then, you know, if you ask a family provider to move out of their home for the period of time where they actually need to be converted from a residence to a commercial facility, that would force them to shut down their business and have no place to live. So that's a significant impact for some of these super small businesses.
Thank you, Ardell.
I wanted to touch on responses to a few questions. Michael, your original question or comment was about, you know, are we too far out ahead of model code at 6 to 16? And I think that goes back to what is our comfort level for the safety measures in place? And that, I think Anjali has a comparison. And so what do you get if you go into the building code and it's sprinklers? But I also want to highlight if we pull the sprinklers forward, and that's a whole topic of discussion, is what does the I get you and what exceptions exist within the I's. So that's I'm just going to put a pin on that, but take back also staffing. So what are the staffing ratios? So when I have the assumption on 12 right now is that there's 2 staff. What Tyler and Karen noted was that based on the age group, you might have a 3rd staff on an increase up to 16. And I believe in the last meeting, the TAG recommended sprinklers, and they also recommended a fire alarm system, and we're okay with 16. And so that's been our starting point for kind of coming into this discussion, is to address, is to further talk about it from that standpoint. What would it take to keep it still? What enhancements do you need to keep it still in the residential code? Get potential increase. So that doesn't answer your question. Is it too far out ahead? It's up to the tag to decide, are we too far out ahead because we've given these other enhancements? Going to Chris's comment about seismic, that's a great observation. I think that's something that the work group can look at. I do want to also note though that even in the SBC, this wouldn't kick into a risk category 3. These would just be under an R3 within the SBC or potentially to an I. And so they wouldn't kick into a higher risk category for seismic. But from a Seattle standpoint, we would potentially look at it for bolt and brace, we call it, or project impact level seismic improvement. So that is something that I think the work group can consider. And then going back to Jen's question about comparison to adult family homes, this group had already looked at going from 6 to 8, and the increase there was to get that increase is, again, sprinklers under an adult family home. They also have a different process. That process isn't in place for DCYF to require a permit or a building inspection or fire inspection for occupancy of 12 and under right now. This proposal includes a checklist and an inspection, a permit, essentially similar to the increase in adult family home. You'd need to do that for the waiver approval. You'd have a permit pulled, and we'd get a checklist similar to our WABA adult family home checklist, where you do get to check for EEROs, you do get to check for all of the access and what is the are the spaces actually closed off from cooking appliances. All of those things could be part of the checklist. So that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Ardell. All right, Dave.
Well, let's go ahead and address a couple of things that I've been thinking about on this one. Those who don't know me, I'm a fire protection engineer with Spokane Fire Department, and I've been involved with daycare facilities quite a while. When the state law required the COs, I was involved in unfortunately having to close down several daycares in the city of Spokane because they couldn't comply with the codes at that time. So I'm very familiar with the situation. I think that the daycare capacity is extremely limited, but I'm also very cognizant of life safety issues. A couple of things to take into consideration is we're looking at a code that's been already modified when we look at the IRC. Under the the model IRC, residential sprinklers are required. The state of Washington has chosen not to provide that. So we're already taking a level of safety away from these types of facilities that the model code has. So by increasing the occupant load above what the model code says, it's another give of the lower safety levels than the model code puts together. I heard a lot throughout the legislative session, a lot of push to move buildings from the commercial code to the residential code because there's less cost. The less cost is because the buildings are not built to the higher level and higher standards, not necessarily seismic, but fire resistance as well. So when we are talking about differences between the IRC and the IBC, we are talking apples and oranges. There's not the same building in the IRC as it would be under the IBC. The other thing that is in my terms of looking at the fire response to something like this, and yes, we are in the city of Spokane now conducting inspections of all these facilities that we're finding. But if we were to have a call coming to an address, it's very possible that we would not even know that there are going to be a number of kids in the building until we open that front door, because there's no way of us knowing in the current situation. So if we're going to be coming to a home that has 18 kids in it, a couple of parents, as well as the family members could be in this home as well, we could have a large number of people in this building, and we would basically be responding to a normal single family residence. We would have to increase that call level up to be able to handle that number of people that are in the facility. These are higher risk facilities. Once we start putting daycares into single family homes, it's not like it's just a business that's all that's in there. You're going to have people in the building that aren't associated with the daycare that are family members of things as well. And the last time we'll bring up is zoning issues. One of the challenges we're having is that can we put daycares of this size into some of the zoning in the jurisdictions within the city, different cities, different counties. I think that's going to be a concern as well. So I don't think we're addressing all of the issues at this point with the proposals that I've seen. So I'm just going to try and keep an open mind as much as possible, but I have some big, deep concerns about any increase in the number of occupants.
Thanks, Dave. Additional comments from folks, and if go ahead, Ardell.
Dave, can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
And I appreciate, so the comparison, pardon me. When you have 12 children potentially in a family home childcare, would that increase your call response, not knowing essentially like how many additional adults might be in that?
It would.
And so do you know right today if you have family home childcares with 12?
We do not.
Licensed to 12? Yeah. And I agree that there are zoning restrictions on this as well. And so kicking it into a required permit wouldn't change the zoning, right? Like the zoning requirements still apply. So I don't think we're proposing any change to zoning based on this, Dave. Once you applied for a permit, the zoning review would identify whether it's allowed in that zone or not, and any additional requirements based on the occupancy.
Correct. But my basic statement was because we're basically looking at single family homes, it would be in single family zoning, which ends up being the ones that typically restrict the number of kids.
Excellent.
Micah, Ron Kirkowitz here.
Yep,
Just,
go ahead.
just a comment on the cities or jurisdictions not knowing that these are going on, before they grant the license, can't they just require that they provide a certificate of occupancy? Doesn't necessarily have to get a permit, but it would identify that the jurisdiction is at least looked at and is aware of it.
Can I speak to that a little bit, Ron? The department requires that a family home provider contact their local fire building department for an inspection every year. And like I said before, some cities do and some cities don't do it. And so it's just too easy right now for providers to say the city doesn't do it, and then we have a form that they fill out saying that they tried, basically. And so if we required a C of O, we do require a C of O when a center applies for a license, because the state fire marshal goes to make a visit for every new center, or if there's critical assessments that need to be made for any reason. So they do require a C of O to go with our request for their inspection. If we, though I'm a little confused, Ron, if we required a C of O from family home providers, what we're going to get is just that they're rated R, they're residential. And I don't know that that would, all they have to do is go down to the desk, the city, and get a copy of the C of O. So I'm not sure that it's set up, maybe I'm wrong, to have that request for a C of O be something that notifies the city that there's a family home business potentially in a home.
Well, correct, but the early discussion was that the jurisdictions didn't know these existed. And so this would then put the city or the jurisdiction on notice that this does exist. And then, if they choose not to process it or to ignore it, then that's the jurisdiction's choice. But saying that we don't know that these are out there, a C of O would at least put them on notice that one is existing.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Todd, do you have something on this or something different on the C of O issue?
Well, it is related to the inspection. I was kind of curious, what was your goal? What were you thinking that the fire department was going to do on that inspection?
Yeah, we were hoping that they would be doing what the work group has talked about for over 12 children, is that somebody would be going in to say, this meets the current code for residential, which is knowing that whoever's going in there understands then that there are children in care in that home, and that their walkthrough or their inspection is going to say this is good to go. That's what we're hoping.
Okay, so like the smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detection.
Correct. And those also are in our WAC already. So we have certain requirements about smoke detectors, smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, that kind of thing. But we want there to be some knowledge from the city, of the city, that these places are in existence.
And I guess I was kind of curious what, I don't know that I've heard what ages are eligible for these home daycares. Is it infant to what age?
Yeah, it is. It's birth through age 12, so to age 13.
And I guess I would assume that there would be fewer birth to 3 months kids related to maybe 10-year-olds.
There are. It's a good point. Where in a center, you probably have classrooms. We do have an ability to mix ages in centers, but in a family home, it's likely they're all just going to be together. So we have requirements about it. Like Tyler said, if there's so many children who are walking, then you can have this many children under 2. If they aren't walking, then you can only have this many. And so the staff to child ratio and the capacity really depends on the ages of the children. So we don't want there to be, 10 infants with 2 11-year-olds. So there's a whole WAC that describes what those parameters are for ages.
Okay, and then does DCYF provide an on-site inspection?
We do. We provide an inspection after they've applied and their application's accepted. Then we make a visit to their home and go through the entire list of WAC regulations. And then we do another inspection somewhere between when they get an initial license and 6 months from then, to see if they're ready for a full non-expiring license, at which time we watch them with children. And again, we go through the whole checklist. So all of the WACs. And then we do make an unannounced inspection every year to the providers.
Okay, I guess one of our biggest concerns, and I think this proved out in the adult family home, was the capability to evacuate in a timely manner. What we are experiencing now in actual fire events is that the area that's involved in the fire, often we call it flashover, goes to flashover in less than 3 minutes. And so much of the debate about going from 6 adult family home beds to 8 was in regards to the capability to evacuate, which depends a lot on age, number of caregivers, training. And I think that from a safety perspective is why my jurisdiction requires fire sprinklers in all new built homes, regardless of use. And I think the sprinklers seems like it almost seems like nobody wants to go there because of cost, but I can tell you if sprinklers are installed, it really does provide a lot of capability to evacuate the numbers of kids that you're talking about with probably the number of caregivers that you have. And I don't think sprinklers deserve the negativity that they often get from the cost perspective. In the city of Redmond, we have retrofitted many homes. It is harder, but it also can be done. And that, in my opinion, would go a long way at providing the ability to increase the numbers.
Is it Todd? Because I
Yes.
just see T. I appreciate that. And I will say the providers are required to do a monthly fire drill and quarterly disaster drills. One of the things that we talked about, and it's been a while since we talked about this, is for us to say if they have a capacity increase over 12 children, that our staff may be potentially required to watch an evacuation in process. Typically, we will check that they have done their fire drills every month, but we aren't required to watch them do it. And so one of the things we talked about early on with our work group was, or maybe it was just within DCYF, was asking our staff to make a specific visit to watch, unannounced, to watch a fire drill happen. I do wish that in reference to the sprinklers, I get it. I completely agree with you that it's safer to have them. And I wonder if Ardell or Anjali would speak to the conversation we had about sprinklers in the work group, because we talked about the fact that occupant levels of less than 50 in a center don't have to have one. So I don't feel comfortable enough talking about it, and I would ask them to sort of chime in.
Dustin, there's a diagram. Yeah, there we go. So I just wanted to highlight the difference, the capacity that exists now without sprinklers in the IRC and in the IBC, just so we have that as a reference point. So in the IBC, we can have up to 50 children in a single-story building that's type 5B, which is wood frame construction, which is what most residences are built in. It can be 9,500 square feet. We could even have up to 100 children where every classroom has a direct exit to grade. And with 50 children, there's also no fire alarm. If we wanted to have multiple stories, it would either be something besides a type 5B, which really gets it out of comparison with a residential building, or there's an area separation with a separate occupancy above. So that's in the IBC now. Under the IRC, as you know, if you have 12 children, by all rights, it is type 5B construction, so it's wood frame, non-rated. That's your limit now without sprinklers. And if you had a multi-story building, the similarity, it's not a full fire separation, but there is a 1/2-inch GWB sheathing underneath the framing at that floor level. So that just gives us kind of a picture of those two codes and how they compare.
Can I comment just to piggyback on that? As a
Yes.
building official, I came into all of these discussions asking for sprinklers, making the same sort of comparison to adult family home. And I feel comfortable going up to 16 because we have 16 in single family, in duplexes. It's an SRC sort of occupant load that doesn't exist actually exist in the SRC, but it's again a threshold that I felt comfortable with sprinklers. But what I can't resolve is exactly what Anjali pointed out, which is what can I do in the IBC versus the IRC? And it's, if we require sprinklers, do you also get the breaks that you get these exceptions that exist for access direct to exit to grade that you get in the IBC?
Okay. Dave, did you want to speak to that question, or Chris, did you want to speak to Ardell's question? And more thoughts?
Oh yeah, Dave
Go ahead,
disappeared.
Chris.
Yeah, I think I can a little bit. So, you know, I think the sprinkler system we're talking with regard to the in-home care situation is NFPA 13D, which is not the same standard which would be installed if we were talking a commercial structure. And it's also not near the cost implications, like pennies on the dollar comparisons. So the level of safety afforded is also different. The 13D fire sprinkler systems, their job is to prevent flashover, as Todd discussed earlier. Their job is not to suppress the fire. The commercial setting, it is a more robust system, much more expensive. Then we just look into the differences between the two codes. I mean, IRC, you can be closer to the property line without having exterior fire rated walls. You can have more windows along property lines. Your fire risk is higher. IRC within the same structure, and I'm not sure how the licensing works, but within that same structure that's non-rated, you could have relatives living in the house unassociated with the childcare, I assume. And they could be a hazard to what's going on in the childcare as long as they're separated from the licensed space physically, is my understanding. Where that would not be the case with the commercial setting. Means of egress are different. It's lesser restrictions, or it's less robust in an IRC structure, hardware, door swing, door width, stair size, stair height, rise and run, these kinds of things. So I think there are a number of things that we could point to that make them substantively different, as apples and oranges, building code, residential code.
We did that analysis, Chris. We're happy to send that to you as well. You're
Cool.
absolutely correct. There are significant differences. And so I think when I look at 12 to 16 and going back to how quickly can they evacuate and what are their hazards and how can we limit the hazards?
Yeah.
But again, yes, there is a difference, but the sprinkler exception is complete. I mean, you wouldn't get in an IBC building, if you can get 50 children with no sprinklers at all, are you saying that you don't get to compare it here because there's other provisions within the IBC that offer additional safety?
Oh, I mean, I would say that I would want sprinklers in that one in the building, in the commercial building, but the cost prohibitiveness has kept it out of there. So,
but and that's, I think that's what I'm sort of struggling with, is there's this sort of irony of like 50 kids don't need to have it.
Yes. Yeah, I think the difference is, I mean, it's all risk and cost. That's how everything is written, right? That's everything we have come together on as the code is written, is about public safety versus cost. When I look at the difference between the cost of that commercial system versus the cost of that residential system, it's just so different. I mean, retrofitting an existing, let's say 2,500 square foot house is probably, let's assume they need to destroy a bunch of finishes and we are in the everything costs more than it really should era of construction, it's still less than a $10,000 problem. And we're talking the addition of 4 kids. It's been 10 years since I've paid for childcare, but I know it is not cheap. So, return on investment there, assuming that there are not other significant costs associated with it, that seems that pencils to me. Whereas compared to the difference between 50 and 54 children in a commercial structure, the cost of sprinkling that commercial structure, we're talking $100,000 plus. So safety versus money versus risk is, I think that's what we should be talking around with the sprinkler part.
Thank you, Chris. Karen, you had your hand up. Did you decide against additional input on that thought? If so, I'll move
yes,
to
it's actually, thank you, Micah. And I love saying your name out loud because it's my son's name. So love it. But I will ask our partners in the work group about the difference in the sprinkler systems, because I just want to better understand it, but I'll leave that for later. Thank you.
Okay. Move on to Dave and then Roger.
All right, I am mute disabled, so I got maybe one of the specific exceptions of the difference between the two, and it's even on your slide here, is that we can have 50 or even 100 where a classroom has direct exit to grade. That's one of the other specifics of why the things were done that way. There was a give a long time ago in the code to facilitate this, and we can't really get that in a single family home. We have 1, maybe 2 doors in and out of that building, and those doors typically are not in the rooms of the classrooms. The basic idea is if the door is right there in the classroom, they can get out very quickly without having to go through hallways, corridors, or other things to be able to exit out the building. So that's part of the trade-off between these 2 different types of constructions, 2 paths that we're getting there. So we're kind of, again, talking apples and oranges. Well, how come we can have 12 here, but we can have 50 here? There are a whole lot of other factors that come into play with this. And I'm actually I wasn't supporting the change of being able to increase that load, just because of historically fires create real challenges with younger age children, especially if we're under 2.5 years old. That's probably the highest risk, the highest concern of loss, the highest impact of a loss. And it's very traumatic for anybody who gets involved in those situations. So we want to make sure that they are protected at the highest level possible, so we never have to have a situation with that. So I kind of agree with Chris a little bit that the concern of, I'd like to see everything sprinkled. I understand that there are politics involved in this, but I think the fire service has already gave enough to be able to be where we're at. I'm not willing to accept anything less than what we have currently.
Would you be okay with that provision then? And this is the, can you ask for sprinkles? Like if you had direct exits to grade, do you get to carry over that exception? If you require sprinklers, but provide an exception for direct exit to grade? Or,
that is only one
or potentially
piece.
even additional staffing.
That's only one piece of all this difference between the I and the R. So I would say that there may be more consideration to that, but I'm not even happy with the 12. I'm not very comfortable with that at all. I'm already saying that we're showing up to a house that has 12 kids in it, potentially has other family members and things all in the building. We're calling more rigs in. And had we known that ahead of time, we would have been able to respond properly. And as Todd brought up, we have 3 minutes. So we get flash over in 3 minutes. So there's not a lot of time to make that decision.
Okay. Thanks for the input, Dave, and thanks for the questions. We're going to move to Roger. And just before you jump in there, Roger, I do want to say I want to make sure we don't cut anybody off on discussion, but I do know that we want to get to some of the proposed language and proposed changes as well. So we'll kind of go maybe for about another 15 minutes on discussion, and then we'll move to those documents so we can, further discuss that language and kind of direction we may or may not go. So thanks, Roger. Go ahead.
Well, Micah, I have two questions and or comments, and number one might help us move forward, I believe, and that is, I would like to hear from Dustin or Micah. What is our direction? This group was asked to come together. What exactly was the ask for this group? Is it a thou shalt come up with something that allows more, or is it a we're supposed to discuss and come up with some thoughts and ideas on how we could more easily how we could make it easier to license daycare? Can you remind us what our task is before us?
Yes. So the goal of, so DCOF has a conflicting WAC that lets them issue a waiver. We have our building codes which do not align with that allowance. The idea is to make it so that our two WACs are in alignment so that we can both play together nicely in the field that we are both working in. And the goal of today's meeting is to evaluate what we have developed as a proposed language for our WAC, while also considering what DCYF has developed for their WAC, and to determine if we want to make changes to the proposal that we have on hand for our WAC. And the IRC, the IFC has been pulled into it with some of their definitions, and there's some questions I'd like to ask when we get to that section, and to determine if we can even entertain the allowance of. So we are looking at getting to a CR 102 filing on this process where we could allow public comment, and ultimately the council will vote on it. And there is still the chance that, even though we may come to consensus within this group and say we like this language we can put forward for comment, that it gets voted down in the full council.
Okay. And I guess I would offer an opinion on that, is that I think everybody agrees that cost-effective healthcare is a huge issue in the state that we are hopefully trying to address. So my second comment really is, and I've heard a number of people touch on it, but it really is a balance of cost and then risk and or public safety. And I guess I didn't introduce myself. I am on the State Building Code Council. I represent the structural engineering community on the State Building Code Council. And I think everybody here would agree that sprinklers makes everybody more comfortable moving forward, or some combination thereof. And at the same time, I go, there've been a few comments, and I forget from whom, but to make it, we will never get to a building code that is going to take all risk off of the table. That's not, I don't think, something that is possible. I mean, from a structural engineer, we often have a discussion, could you design a building that would withstand every single earthquake? And the answer is maybe, but it would be so cost prohibitive that you would never do it. So I think I'm going to just suggest that our task here is to align codes and WACs as best as possible, making sure that we try to have regulations or code language that provide as much safety and reduce the risk as much as possible for the least cost possible. However, are some of these building code requirements going to increase cost? Probably. And that's something we as a group are tasked to do, to kind of balance the increased cost with the requirement to provide safety and to the public as much as we possibly can. So those are my comments, and I'll let everybody else weigh in. But yes, moving forward, I think just clarity on what we're trying to do here is good. So
thanks, Roger. I don't necessarily think that the task was to specifically align with the WAC that DCYF has adopted. However, based on the SBCC meeting and direction from the full council on 10/21/22 was to create the work group to develop an off-cycle rule to permit an increase in the number of children in the family home child care and still remain in the scoping of the IRC or the Washington Residential Code. However, that doesn't mean there is an alignment with an open-ended number. I'm not sure there is a number in the WAC. I'd have to go back and review the documents for DCYF as far as a limit on these. So not necessarily to align, but to create that rule and identify an additional limit if we're going to increase it, and additional, say, requirements in the rule to allow that increase in the building code. Again, I think one of the things here that we have to realize is that, yes, there's an issue, but that doesn't mean they can't meet requirements of the building code. So I know we have a few more hands up, and I know we have more discussion on this. And one more item I want to throw into the discussion topic here that hasn't been brought up yet. And again, there's several code officials in here that are much smarter than I am, but we haven't talked about accessibility. We're already allowing a increase to 12 without an increase in accessibility because it's coming out of the residential code where the accessibility requirements are not applied. So now if we increase to 18, 20, 35, is what we would essentially be doing is lowering the number of accessible facilities for children with disabilities to have childcare in those requirements. And I don't even see that in our proposal for saying, hey, you still have to comply with Chapter 11 of the Building Code for accessibility. We're only talking about sprinklers. Currently, Chapter 11, 1103-212 says daycare facilities, part of a dwelling unit, only the portion has to comply. But of course, that's if they fall within the building code. So now if we're going to 18, we're way outside the normal for accessibility requirements as well. So I'm going to drop that in there, and then we're going to move to Chris because I know other people have comments. Thanks.
Well, thanks. Going back to the conversation Ardell was having with Dave, I believe. Okay, I think I am convinced that there might be residential structures out there that don't look like the building I have in mind. So what would it take to pull me along with the discussion of what's in front of us, the what's different between these two? I think something that could pull me along would be, yes, we haven't pictured this house that has a wide open space that is the classroom. I'm picturing every house that I've ever been in, which is, there's bedrooms, there's a living room, there's a kitchen. Maybe there's a little small bonus room, but maybe there's a house out there where they've remodeled and there is a big 500-600 square foot space, and it has direct code compliant egress from it. So I think perhaps what I would say is we're trying to avoid all of the building code requirements, I think is the intent, not changing codes, which carries a lot of different things. But maybe I could be brought along if it was the exception that you were talking about, Ardell, if it was egress is compliant with Chapter 10 of the IBC or something like that, and there's direct access at grade. And that would capture that building that I'm not thinking of that might exist out there. And then I second what Micah said about accessibility. That is something I think we've overlooked. But
okay. Thanks, Chris. Any input from others on the sprinkler item that Chris and Ardell have spoken about? Is that what you're going to speak to, Ardell? Or
I was going to speak to your last comment about accessibility. I think Anjali and Tyler might be as well.
Yeah, let's go with Tyler first. Then if that's what we're going to speak against, he did have his hand up first. Sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to make sure we're kind of moving on from the sprinkler system information.
But thank you, Chris, for that feedback.
Yeah, thanks again. And I want to thank everybody here for this discussion. Like I said, I'm not a professional in the building and fire arena, and I really appreciate this. Your input is absolutely critical to our understanding. And I just want to sort of have a final thought here. is that what's going to happen if we do or don't create these this flexibility, as we're calling it. I think there's a thought here that if this group keeps the requirements of the way they are, the kids are all going to end up in a safer place. I don't think that's true. I think these kids that are in the facilities with waivers are going to end up in a less safe place. And here's why. Micah had a question in the beginning asking, well, what's your data behind 6 to 12 and now 12 plus? And unfortunately, we don't have data at the 6 children break because that's not a distinction we make in Washington. But the data that we do have that is overwhelming is that children are safer in licensed facilities. Our licensing in the childcare realm requires training, requires CPR, requires emergency management, requires fire extinguishers, requires educated staff. The new waiver criteria here is going to require smaller ratios. It's going to require a timed drill for evacuation. All of these requirements go away if these kids go to an unlicensed facility. And that's where these kids are going to go if they're not being served in one of these waivered programs with a license. And that's just the unfortunate reality is people are going to go what's nearby and what's cheapest. And so we know there are going to be more kids that are served in a safer manner if we can capture them in a licensed facility. And that's where the gray market comes in here. And that's what we're really trying to get to at the end of the day. There's not going to be some cheaper, safer environment where they magically go to, unfortunately. They're going to go to a less safe setting with none of these requirements.
Thanks, Tyler. Anjali?
There are some DOJ requirements for accessibility. Sorry, my video is not working. There are some DOJ requirements for accessibility, even in residential care. If you have an existing residence, the amount of changes you might have to make would be much lower than a commercial facility. I'd be happy to send those along. I've collected some of that stuff. But if it's a new, like if you're putting in a new bathroom for family care, if you have an architect working with you, that architect should put in an accessible bathroom. That's my position.
Ardell?
Relative to accessibility, I was confirming, yes, you're right. That's not within this proposal. The idea is that it's still subject to ADA, it's still subject to the DOJ requirements, and an applicant must make accommodations. Tyler, Karen, correct me here. When I asked this question early on, you told me that DCYF can take away a license if they are not compliant and if they are not making the accommodation. The other comment, again, back to, what can the work group do out of this conversation to make the proposal more acceptable to carrying it, to making it a successful proposal moving forward? What I heard was, fire alarm sprinklers potentially to get up to 16. And Dave, I hear you're not a fan of that still. But are there things under licensing, under a minimum staffing ratio, is if you have 16 children and you require a third staffer, I think right now, Tyler, Karen, correct me here, you could have, depending on the age group, that would still fall under 2. But if they were all, over 2.5, right? But under 3, under 2.5, I understood it to be 3 are required. Is that correct?
It is, Ardell. It's when there's anyone under age 2, the requirement in this waiver process is a 1-to-6 ratio.
Right. So you'd get 3 staff.
Mhm.
And could you also potentially, on the licensing side, can there be a timed fire drill requirement?
Yeah, I think there can be a time to fire. We're open to hearing anything, and I want to make sure, Micah, you mentioned that high number, which I don't want to say again, of children because it's terrifying. But I also want all of you to realize we're not asking for that number. We hope that that number would never be approved. The number that we're looking at is 16, probably, if that's worth talking about. But yes, Ardell, we're happy to look at what could go into our WAC to make it stronger, and including time drills and observed drills. So, and that can be quarterly, it could be yearly, like I don't know, but we're open to hearing it.
Well, and I just want to add that several of those enhancements are in the draft that Dustin brought up earlier. The evacuation enhancement, the heat detector, an additional fire extinguisher, that we're planning to move ahead with these in our own childcare licensing WAC, regardless of what this group does to the state building code or IRC code.
Okay. All right. I don't want to close down discussion. I think that we should pull up some of the documents as Dustin has done here and maybe discuss some of these parameters. And then I just want to follow up. You know, Roger was kind of asking what our goal is today. Is this, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm thinking that the goal today is to provide additional direction or information to the work group on concerns from the tag or members of both tags, IRC tag and IFC tag, and then take those back and further modify the code sections to bring forward for a full vote at a later date. Is that what I'm hearing from the group? From the tag group, I guess I should ask the tag members. Don't be shy.
Well, I'm thinking that with the time constraint that we have kind of placed on this topic with this meeting, that going through all the language and having a proposal that we could move forward for CR 102 is not where we're going to end up at the end of today's meeting. So like Micah said, taking into consideration the concerns of the tag, and going back and looking at the DCYF WAC, the proposed language that we have prepared for the IRC, and then also looking at the definitions that are included in the IFC and incorporating some of those concerns and trying to get some more consensus on those topics. The direction is what we're looking for to further modify what we have here to discuss, and to discuss maybe at another future combo tag meeting.
Okay.
And I don't know,
Thanks, Dustin.
is that in agreement with the other folks here? Hearing
That's
no
my
dissension.
understanding, Dustin. Yeah. If you're asking folks outside the tag, then that's my understanding.
Yeah, I'm not the one doing the work, but that's what sounds like the best process to me.
And speaking of Chris, I had mentioned bringing in an operational permit through the fire code as another way for the jurisdictions to be aware. I'm kind of a fan of that, and I just want to voice that opinion at this juncture.
I actually think that's a reasonable request at this point, because it could at least provide us a little bit more feedback where these locations are, making sure that they're meeting our code, not necessarily DCYF's codes too.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so Dustin, if you could, would you mind bringing up the language proposal document for R331 that you have with the yellow and green colors on? I think that's maybe where we need to discuss next. Just looking at the time, I think we have about a half hour or so left in the IRC tag portion, and then I know the IFC tag has other topics on the agenda for today. So just some further discussion points here. You know, we obviously had previously discussed at the tag level the number the request for an increase. There was discussion on that, and I'm not sure, unfortunately, the DCYF folks weren't there at that meeting, but that tag meeting led us to the 16 number. And after today's discussion, are there any tag members that want to further increase that number, or stick with that as the recommendation or possible recommendation for the increase? And I can open that up to other members as well, even DCYF, if you want to discuss that number and what that means. Just open it up to the entire meeting here.
I will just say for DCYF that, we're tasked by the legislature to allow more than 12 children in childcare. And so we're happy to go with 16. We're happy to have it not be over 16, if that is helpful.
And just point out that the original kind of was 18, because 6 and 12, and we kind of thought that even groups of 6 could be maybe a easier way to look at it. But 16 is a number that's more readily identifiable in the building code. And so 16 was kind of the agreed upon number at the last point. And, so the 16 is what we have in the current draft. And you'll notice 18 is stricken out in this definition at the moment.
I will just say that the reason that our union supports 18 is that when you are taking on the costs of an additional staff person to meet your staffing ratios, you want to be able to have the maximum number of kids in care, both for your own bottom line and also because the need is out there. 16 kind of leaves 2 slots and the income to support your business unfilled. And so we have a strong preference for 18. We earlier in this process, like our union completely agrees that like 35 is not a family home. People choose family homes as their childcare for lots of reasons. One of them is the relatively small number of kids there. 35 is a center. And so we're very comfortable putting limits on this. But in terms of just like the business decisions, 18 would be a better fit.
Okay, thank you for that input. Any members of the tag have questions on that or thoughts?
Uh, 16 doesn't seem like a home environment to me either. So still a lot of kids plus staff. Do we have any data? So you said there's about 500,000 kids that need placement. So what's the difference between 12 and 16 and 18? How many kids does each of that represent? If we allow the 16, does that cut that number in half? Or
I think that is a more complicated question because it's about whether you have the licensable space. So out of 100 family homes, are even 25 of them in a family home that has licensable space to qualify under DCYF WAC for this waiver? So I don't know that we can answer that question.
I guess it would be helpful for me to know how much of the problem are we even solving then by doing this?
Well, I think we're helping to solve the problem. I think the reason that it went to the legislature was because something is more than nothing, I guess I would say.
Karen, maybe you can comment on the overall number of family home providers we have. I heard a number early on that was in the 3,300 across the state. Is that correct?
Thanks for that. I'm gonna take a second just to pull this report up because I was just opening it up myself to see how many there are. So I'll get back to you.
Thanks. And with that, if you're able to say how many children are currently served.
This could take me a minute, so please keep talking.
Yeah, that was no worries there. I think that some of the available square footage questions are probably fairly important, especially from Jen. On one of the documents that is posted, Jen, there is from the draft WAC from DCYF that has their available square footages. I guess to kind of add on to that, and that will be an interpretation question for DCYF, are the square footages cumulative there? So one of them is 35 square feet of licensed space indoor, and then outdoor, and then additional 15. So it's only 35 square feet per of licensed square feet. What does that mean? What does licensed square feet mean? Like they can exclude portions of the house, and the part they're licensing has to include that much for each child. Is that what I'm understanding? Karen, you're muted if you're talking.
Yeah, thank you, Micah. The number of family home providers is 3,364. I don't have capacity yet, so but I will answer the capacity question and square footage. We require 35 square feet per child of space that is going to be used by children. So they may have a bedroom that isn't going to be licensed. We don't count it. They might have, we don't count hallways. So we've done this knowing what the state fire marshal does with square footage, and we kind of copycat that. So indoor space is separate than from outdoor space. So we require 75 square feet outside per child. And when they're, depending on how much square footage they have, if they only have square footage for 10 outside, but they're allowed to have 13 children, then we ask them for a plan on how they're going to do that so they don't have too many kids outside at once. So we're not counting bathrooms, we're not counting kitchens, we're counting the space only that children are going to be using during childcare hours for play and activities and so on. Did that answer your question, Micah?
That does. That helps a lot. I think to kind of get into further, we're only looking at about an additional 210 square feet for every 6 children. Is what I'm not an engineer. So there's other engineers on here.
And then we do, sorry to interrupt, we do ask in the waiver for over 12 children for an additional 15 square feet for any child who is under 2. So we're adding that in for the waivers.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to Dave's question. You had your hand up, and then Roger, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to make a comment on the 16 versus the 18. I was involved in adult family home going from the 6 to the 8. We were very reluctant to do that, but we had a lot of similar modifications to get to that. You've gotten about as far as I'm willing to go with it. I can't go any higher than 16 with even what we're showing here. So just to have that background that we can kind of hit the limits for where I'm comfortable with.
Thanks, Dave. Roger.
My comment's going to be similar, and it kind of comes from a design and enforcement perspective. But part of what we're talking about how to here is trying to get various codes and WACs aligned. And so sticking with the 16 purely because 16 is one of the limits other places in the code makes a whole lot of sense to me. When you start mixing it's 16 here and it's 18 there, and just adds a whole lot of complexity for everybody to try to figure out what the right answer is. So I would lean towards 16 for that reason. And I guess I would be curious if we're talking about number of kids, if we're making it easier to get 16 for people to have 16 kids in a home, I think that's a big step forward. That extra 2, is it a big deal or not? Or are we making a big step forward just to allow the 16? So I would tend to lean towards limiting it to 16.
Thanks, Roger.
Although I will comment, I'm on the IFC, not the IRC tag, so I guess I don't get a vote anyway.
That's okay. I don't think we have a quorum to take a vote for IRC tag today, but at least we're giving the work group direction. So thanks for your input. All right. So moving on down the list, again, I'm trying to get through some more of this before the end of our meeting. And this was the only thing on our agenda. Go back and look at that.
Yeah,
sorry, just
for
real
this
quick.
section.
Before we move on from the number of kids thing, I think we're all smart as code officials and can understand that one section might be one thing and one might be another. If at the end of the day, number 16 doesn't, if at the end of the day, we come together and we realize that the safety enhancements have been enough to support changing the code, we can show that it's either for 16 or 18 people. I don't want to just limit ourselves to the discussion at 16. If 18 is really what is asked of us, and we can always go back and bring it down if we're not satisfied that it is meeting what is needed for those 2 additional kids. That makes sense.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Yep, absolutely. Karen.
I'm getting back to you with numbers. 3,364 family childcare providers currently licensed. Their capacity, approved capacity right now is 32,900 children. I don't know that all those slots are filled. I don't know that everyone who is allowed to have 10 children has 10 children, but that's the capacity they've been approved for.
Okay. Thank you for the information. I think that'd be helpful for the group. And thanks, Chris, for that good point that maybe we don't need to set a number. If the enhanced criteria will meet a higher number than that, maybe where we land. But it's a good discussion. Okay. Just want to move down to the next change. The heat detector, I don't think anyone had an issue with that. Is that correct? That came from the work group, and does anyone on the tag have additional input on that, or is that acceptable?
Sorry, me again. I've had feedback from developers, and I don't know that it's legitimate or real, but having trouble finding. Okay, heat detector is probably not the right word. It should be heat alarm, because it's like a smoke alarm. I think that's the intent, is that it makes noise. I've had feedback that they're difficult to find, but I've been able to find them online from reputable manufacturers. So, but I think alarm is probably the word that we want to use.
I would just keep it in line with the rest of the IRC, fix it everywhere, or keep it consistent, because we use heat detector in other places in the IRC.
Oh, come on, guys.
I know.
Okay, if that's what it's used everywhere else, I would keep it the same, but it's wrong.
I agree with you.
What I'm hearing is a code change proposal for next cycle in the IRC, Washington state level. Thanks, Chris.
Sounds like you've got one ready to write. Yep, go for it.
Okay. Moving on down the list of this document. Oh, where'd it go? I've got too many things open, folks. I apologize.
Micah, can I ask before you move on to comment on the use of single family home in 331.1?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not sure that's appropriate. Is that the direction of the IRC tag to direct these to only be permitted within single family residences, which I don't believe is currently part of, which would be a change to the current scoping.
Sorry, I agree with you. I don't see an issue with the current scoping language or why it was proposed to be modified.
So which section is 331.1?
Correct.
And single family home is not used. I got single family residence.
Same thing.
Right. So are we proposing to not, so what would be the proposal to just remove this? Family home
The
child care?
question,
So this is a modification in, so at one of our last tag meetings, we discussed whether or not, the provisions in the current amendment apply to up to 6 children, or whether or not they apply to, so as through 1 through 12, does this section apply 1 through 12 children? Or does this section apply to 7 through 12 children? And the answer that I thought I got at that last meeting was that this section applies to family home childcare uses that are 7 to 12 children, and that up to 6. So I don't know. So you'll notice that the formatting is much different in what we have in the current WAC versus what I have on that language proposal screen. And it looks a lot, there's a lot of numbered sections that are subsections of the main section there. And so the goal was to try to make it, to clarify that in this one, that up to 6 children, you don't have to do anything extra to your residence. And then below in 331.2, you have additional requirements that now apply if you are above 6 children in your use. So I would be open to suggestions on how to word this sentence. I struggled with it when I was drafting it, and I kind of just threw it together and put it in there because I just wanted to indicate that there weren't changes required if you're 1 through 6 children.
okay. Go ahead, Chris, and then Todd.
Yeah, maybe Todd's saying the same thing. Language suggestion. I think the intent is for us not to allow this type of facility in a owner-occupied lodging home or a licensed care facility, right? So I think the intent is for us to allow it in single-family duplex and townhouse. Or we could go back to the scoping language of the IRC and pick those items that we do intend to allow this within.
Okay.
At least I think that's what we're trying to do.
That would be a question for Ardell. Is that your intent, Ardell, is to match it with the scoping language of the IRC of 1 and 2 family dwelling?
I'm trying to get, what does the tag want to see here? Single family residences is something that reference exists out of adult family homes, and I think that's more relative to match some sort of WAC there, and that's fine. I can ask.
Okay.
I can look at the scoping.
I think,
but I see what you're saying,
yeah.
Chris. Like you don't want to see an adult family home and a childcare and or an owner occupied B&B. Like
Yeah, but I think we do want to allow it in a duplex.
yes, that's what I'm
So,
trying to get.
I don't know that single family residence tells me, the code official, that it's okay in a duplex without me having to think real hard. And the less you have to make us think real hard, the better.
I would agree. And single family residence is not used throughout the code at all. So we can work on some language for that. I want to go ahead and hear from Todd and Jen if they have language suggestions. If not, we can further develop language for that. Go ahead, Todd.
So I just wanted to get clarification. I hadn't really even thought about this, but none of the current 3,364 licenses are in any dwelling unit within a multifamily structure?
Just got back. I think I heard the question. So duplex. I know that something just passed from the legislature about potentially condos or HOAs or something. But
that one just says like HOAs can't ban childcares.
Okay.
It does talk about like
Yep. Okay.
But I guess my question is, are these family daycares in multifamily dwelling units?
I don't know that there's apartments, and but I do know that there are in duplexes. Is that considered a multifamily dwelling?
Not from the code perspective. The 1 and 2 family, the question came up, the 1 and 2 family or IRC townhomes, which is kind of constrained with the code language we're talking about. And I was just curious, so then a IBC built townhome or a multifamily, you're not given licenses to individual dwelling units or people that are in a rented apartment type scenario.
I would really, Todd, I would need to check that to be sure. So I'm not comfortable answering yes or no to that. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if we're looking for capacity, there's a lot of multifamily structures that have the safety elements in. Now, they may not qualify for the 12 units, but if you're not currently tapped into that, there's a lot of sprinklered multifamily structures that they may have a dwelling unit occupant that is certainly capable of providing some level of childcare. Just a thought.
So what I have on screen here is one of the sections of language that will kick you from the group E occupancy or group I4 occupancy to the residential code. And, by my reading, I would say that if you are going to the IRC, you are going to be an R3 or an IRC building. And so apartment buildings, which are like R2, wouldn't be included. And I don't think that they're trying to be in the R3 occupancy, because I do believe, as I may be speaking out of turn, but I believe that those should be sprinklered as well. And, that we're trying to stay within the residential code. And I think that including duplexes and townhouses, I can agree on. But beyond those, I think that we're getting outside of the scoping, if I'm accurate.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Jen, and then I think Tyler, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I suggest we use the specific existing IRC language of 1 and 2 family dwelling or townhouse, not duplex, not single family residence. But is it really allowed per dwelling unit? So could you have a daycare potentially in both dwelling units of a duplex? I think that should be clarified, or can you only have one per duplex structure? And then we do see, I recently reviewed a building permit for an adult family home, where there's an adult family home on one level, there's the residence, the occupied residence on another level, and on a third level there's an ADU. So again, you could have a dwelling unit that is on a different level or separate from the ADU. Can it have a childcare coming out of it or not? If that's not really clear, because an adult family home is still considered a single family residence, right? And it's both.
Thanks, Jen. Good questions. I'm not sure who wants to try to answer those. Would that be Tyler or Karen?
I have a sort of answer to that. There's nothing in our laws regulating or restricting childcare in multifamily units. We have the authority to license them in apartments or duplexes, townhomes, whatever. However, to date, we don't. And I can't give you one specific reason for why not. Applicants tend to have standalone single family houses or in duplexes. We don't, and I'd have to confirm numbers on this, but to my knowledge, we do not have multi-level apartment rented units with any family home providers in them. Other cities, other states obviously do, and they have regulations to that effect. So that may be something certainly on the horizon in Washington state, especially with this bill that passed prohibiting HOAs and condo associations from themselves prohibiting a family home childcare within their built entity. So something to flag for future conversation, certainly. Would love to talk about this with this group down the road.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. Thank you, Tyler. I think we've got some direction on R 331.1 for developing a modification away from single family residences. Looking at time, I think we need to move down to R 331.3, the last few sections of modifications to this document. I know that we might not have gotten through all the sections and there may be additional input, but looking at the time, I think we're going to have to wrap up here and let the work group have another go at it and then bring it back. I understand, you know, there's some concerns about time constraints, but we'd rather get something moved forward that has a better chance of passing full council instead of having to continue to have issues with the code language. So what you're seeing on the screen, again, yellow is from the work group and green is from the IRC tag. So did the tag have any issues with the yellow language from the work group? Or did the work group have any issues with that?
At our last meeting, on the monitored fire alarm section, so 331.3.1, the work group had proposed a UL listed residential fire alarm, or not fire alarm, fire alarm, sorry. And when discussed within the tag, it was brought up that there were issues being experienced within these residential alarm systems, and they proposed an NFPA 72 system instead. And it was, the work group wanted to kind of maybe hear a little bit about the issues that are being experienced and, you know, maybe justify the NFPA 72 system over the residential system that wouldn't necessarily monitored as rigorously.
Thanks, Dustin. A little bit of background. Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry. I think I have some good input on those. So the language in front of us, a monitored fire alarm. So the questions I have would be, does that mean, the language here should match how we write it in Chapter 9 of the Building Code and Fire Code, whatever we decide to do. And it would read something like a monitored fire alarm system that activates the occupant notification system in accordance with 905. whatever, right? So if the intent is to install a real fire alarm notification system, is it a manual system? Is it an automatic system? Do we expect to see horns and strobes? I don't know what is in front of me, what it wants to require. So the clarity isn't there for me to understand that. For the emergency lighting, I would recommend we just point to the building code / fire code section about emergency lighting. And we can just say, perhaps emergency lighting is required in accordance with IFC blah, blah, blah throughout the licensed space. And then we can make a clear distinction between the non-licensed and licensed space. And that might be simpler and more clear language. On the sprinkler section, I wouldn't say NFPA 13D. We don't ever say that in the code, I don't think. We would say 903.3.1.1.3, I think, whatever it is in the building code, fire code. And that would be a better reference there. So, and I'd be happy, I mean, if Ardell, you're helping write this stuff, I can help out too outside of this meeting with some more time with that kind of stuff.
That'd be great. Thanks, Chris.
Oops, I'm muted. Thanks, Chris, for that input. Jen.
Yeah, I like those suggestions, but I thought in the IRC we tried to not point back to the IBC to reference it, that we tried to get the code into the code versus just as an overall thing. Are there other sections where we do that, where we just say per IBC blah, blah, blah?
I don't know. I don't play in the IRC.
I think we could save
I'll
some
agree with you on that, Jen. Yes. Sorry. but yeah, if we want to have the information here, as far as the one code to go to, especially if we're trying to maintain this level of construction in the IRC, we don't want to point it back to the IBC if possible. So we just need to pull that language over and just duplicate it if that's what you're suggesting, Chris. And it sounds like you're going to help maybe work to develop that. And
Quick question on if we keep it like it is drafted and say NFPA 13D, would we then have to pull in a different standard into the reference standard section as well on this?
No, you could just reference the appendix. NFPA 13D is copied in its entirely in the appendix of the IRC. You
Awesome.
could just
Thank
call
you.
it P, whatever it is in the IRC.
And should it say NFPA 13D or better? Because they're not prohibited from doing a better sprinkler system, right? They probably
Mm,
won't do it, but
No,
or
it's
is
not
it?
necessary. I would just
Yeah.
reference P, whatever it is, in the building code.
And then Ardell had brought this up earlier too. What about these exceptions? I don't know that I haven't really had time to think about it, but I'm not yet convinced that we should allow these exceptions, but I definitely see the reasoning for them.
I
think
put
I'd
them
save
in
more
there
time.
as a way to maybe allow a increase in children in a facility without requiring a sprinkler. I pulled them from IBC 903 2.6 for I occupancy sprinkler systems. You'll notice that they say group I4 daycare in the text there, and if we were to include them, I would change that particular wording. And so they're in there is kind of just a conversation starter.
hey, sorry, I'm on mute. Go ahead, Ken, and then Ricky.
I'll just have to disagree a little bit with not referring to the IFC in the 2021 International Residential Code in R328.3. It does specifically spell out sections and says of the International Fire Code. So I don't think that we're doing anything wrong by referencing the fire code for certain sections or the building.
Okay, thanks, Ken.
So this is Ricky Campbell. I'm on the IFC tag group. I'm industry, so I'm a sprinkler fitter. I just got a question. Why the reference of 13D? And I'm sure it's cost, right? I just want to clarify to the group. A 13D system is only designed to discharge at 10 minutes. Yes, they will discharge longer than that, provided the water source and supply. 13R would be a half an hour. A 13 would be an hour plus. But a 13D system would not be inspected on an annual basis. A 13R system would be. Are you guys taking that in consideration or anything like that?
Question. We do have a hand up. I do want to point out to folks as we discuss this 13D option, that is current WAC language as a Washington amendment in section R331 and has been for quite a while. But if there's an answer to Ricky's question, that'd be great. But I do want to point that out, that is existing language. The exceptions would be something a little different, but the 13D language is existing. Ardell, you had your hand up. Were you going to answer?
I was going to say the same. Like, when we asked for code changes, you always struggle with, do I clean it up or do I match what's there to sort of keep it simplistic and conceptually get the changes forward that you're asking for? And I think Dustin was using the 13D language exactly for that reason. It's already there.
So I don't know if that answers your question, Ricky. And if you want to propose something different, we'd be open to that, I think. Because I'm not opposed to making changes for cleanup if we need to. Okay. Were you going to say something, Ardell?
I would just put forward that I don't think that the work group would propose moving to a higher system as a requirement. That 13D is what we have currently, and the proposal here is to maintain it as 13D for the increase.
Quick question for the work group. This was left in here at our last meeting. Sprinklers were not really agreed upon as being a viable option for the group. So I know we've talked a lot about sprinklers. And you know, at one point it was said, if sprinklers are part of this proposal, it's a no-go for the work group. And I've heard from the tag that if sprinklers aren't part of the proposal, it's a no-go for the tag. So I just want to make sure that if this is the fulcrum piece of information, that we are aware of that. And is what I just said the accurate statement for both the work group, the representing DCYF, and then the IRC/IFC tag? Are you guys, is this a fulcrum component of this proposal?
I believe so.
So I'm gonna jump. Yeah, for Dave, I think it is. I'm not going to say jump in and fully answer that question for you, Dustin. I think the work group needs to evaluate the other changes and what they can and can't accept as those changes get further developed. And then we don't have a quorum for the IRC tag today. I know the IFC tag can maybe speak to that. They do have a quorum of folks, but I think that we need to develop the proposal, and the work group needs to come forward with maybe multiple options. The tag can then vote on it and move it to full council. If there's still an issue, then the full council could solve that. Again, I don't think that's an answer we need to provide today, but go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that because it's what I'm thinking. I wouldn't say it's a no-go. It is the fulcrum. This is the piece that is going to hold up for family childcare providers. And I think that we can do just what you said, is the work group comes up with some things that, and we'll wait to hear from, TAG. So we'll just all keep working on it, but it is the piece that is, it will be a no-go for some providers.
Yeah, I'll second that. Again, just going back to these providers operating on such a thin budget. And I 100% get the importance of sprinklers and the life safety provision, but practically speaking, this would probably kill the waiver process for people doing this in any realistic sense statewide. And just want to put that out there, that somebody mentioned these being, only a $10,000 fix, which in the arenas that you guys operate in, that makes sense. That does seem relatively cheap, but for providers that have $50 a month in extra costs, that could mean whether they can operate their program or not. It's black and white that this may kill the waiver program around the state. So that being said, these exceptions are more generous than what is currently in the code. And so if the group wants to move them forward, I am in support of that. But realistically, that's kind of what we're looking at.
Excellent. Thank you, folks, for your input. I know we are now over time, at least for the IRC portion, I believe. Even though the IFC folks are here, we do want to make sure they have enough time to discuss their additional items on the agenda. I want to say thanks to Dustin for providing some information. And I know it wasn't brought up necessarily through the discussion, but he did provide some adopted language from the state of Oregon that we are, it's another pointer that we are way beyond what other even regional jurisdictions are doing currently. And now we're asking for something further, which is not a problem. But again, for the DCYF folks, I think that we do need to evaluate some data that we have to look at least as far as code language goes, coming from other states and other jurisdictions, that is valuable and important. And again, we kind of had centered a lot of this around safety with egress and sprinklers being some of the main talking points, but we have not even got into the accessibility issue and whether or not the increase would even, look at going, okay, we're going to let you do the increase, but you still have to meet the requirements of Chapter 11, like other areas or regions are doing. and how the current code states. So I think we have some direction back to the work group. Again, I don't think we have enough information today to provide a vote from the tag, at least for the IRC tag. The fire tag coming up next may say something different if they revisit this topic today. But if there's any questions on, I think, what we have determined or provided today, that there should be some notes from the minutes from SBCC staff, hopefully in the near future. And if not, I think anyone could be that is on the tag today, you could reach out to those folks and ask questions, including myself. With that, I think we probably should wrap up the portion of the IRC tag. And since we did not have a quorum, there won't be any vote taken today, whether that's to approve the agenda or not, or any additional actions. So with that, I'll turn it back over to SBCC staff. I would imagine that folks would like to take a break before we move into the next portion of the IFC tag. And for those folks that don't stay on for that, I appreciate all your time and effort and work on this important topic.
Thank you for your time.
Just before the work group logs off, I'd like to try to get within the next week or two another work group session with us, and we'll just reach out via email and coordinate that. And then I propose Tony take over as chair, and then maybe support a 15-minute bio break.
Okay, let's go ahead and start with a 15-minute break. That puts us at, let's see,
12:21.
12:21. Thank you, Dustin. We'll come back at 12:21.
Thank you for facilitating that, Micah.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate your time.
Should
Thanks,
IRC
everyone.
members log back on in 15 minutes or?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Oop.
Okay, I think that's my cue. Let's go ahead and resume our tag meeting for today. We're going to move on to agenda item 3B. Before we do so, Justin, do you want to just do a quick roll call, make sure we still have a quorum?
Yes, sir. All right, Tony Doan is here. Zach Tuck. I don't see in the list. Quinn Ty. I don't see in the list. Corey Thomas. I'm not seeing in our list. Ken Brulette, I see online. Mike Six. Not online. Dave Cocott. I see he's logged in, but he's muted.
Here.
There he goes. Chris Seaman.
Yep, I'm here.
Ricky Campbell.
I'm here.
Roger Hiringa.
I'm here.
Kevin Marr. And Paul Clark.
Here.
All righty, we still have the same quorum we had earlier today.
Thank you, Dustin. Anyone from the public that would like to be recognized before we move into this topic? Okay, very well. Let's go ahead and jump into the introduction to proposal to modify IFC Chapter 12 for energy storage systems. Ken, I'll go ahead and let you introduce it, and then from there we'll open it up for comment.
Okay, thanks, Tony. So this is something that's been in the works since November of last year. And thank gosh, we're at the tag right now to review the Chapter 12 proposed changes. And I saw on the agenda, we had two different agendas listed. One was also to discuss the emergency rule, but right now, hopefully we can just talk about these the changes to Chapter 12. So specifically would be the 1207 section. And I'll just wait for him to get there. And if there's anybody, actually, Dustin, are you driving this?
Yes, sir.
Can you just go to 120711 just in case there's any residential people on there? So this proposal, in a nutshell, we're trying to bring forward all of the 2024 adopted IFC changes into our 2021 code because of the energy storage systems and the issues with the industry. It's just moving so fast. And what we did in a quick stopgap was put together an emergency rule that adopted NFP 855. And so that was our stopgap until we could get to this point, is making these changes to 1207. But in 1207.11, oh, scroll back.
Here it is.
There you go. So just go up a little bit. I think.
Oh,
So in the proposal that you guys got, the documents, the 1207.11 has a kind of a residential section, this ESS in group R3 and R4. And what I did here, and this was just a correlation issue, the 2021 International Residential Code already has this language in it. So all I'm doing in this 1207.11 is wherever it's highlighted in yellow, that is just showing the corresponding language that's in the current 2021 IRC. So I'm not making up any new language. I'm just showing what wasn't correlated where it should have been in the 2021 code. It wasn't done. So it's basically, that's all I'm doing, is bringing forward 2021 IRC language into the 2021 IFC in this section 1207.11. Previous documents that I had provided had actually showed a picture of the barricades that could be used to protect the equipment. And I removed those, and the reason being is that I didn't want to have to go through the IRC committee and make any changes to our state code. So I just made sure that I left the 2021 IRC alone and just brought over the 2021 IRC provisions into the 2021 fire code for this off-cycle rulemaking. So that's where you see the highlighted yellow. And again, all of the purple that's underlined is the 2024 language. So if you want to pop back up to the beginning of chapter or section 1207.
Sorry, hold on.
Well, yeah, no, you can start right there. That's fine. 1201's fine. So, and again, this is stuff that I didn't create myself. This is just what's already in the 2024 code. And the links on the documents, you'll see where he's got the little highlights. What I ended up doing is linking every single code change proposal, the reasoning for it, that the individual who's reviewing this document can see where it came from. So you can see that how it was proposed at the national level, what the reasoning was, who it was proposed by, and they all got approved. So I'm not the expert in ESS. I am just the person that's trying to facilitate getting us updated to the most current code available for this industry. And also I've been participating in some Fire Code Action Committee meetings regarding energy storage systems for the 27 code. And I am learning a lot from other jurisdictions that have done exactly what we're proposing right here, is bringing forward the 2024 into the 2021 code. I know that California has done it when I talked to them. Some people out in Nevada have, and it's all based on the energy storage systems that are being installed in those areas. So if anybody has any individual questions on one of these topics, we can look at each one in these sections and take a look at it. And we can go from there. And then I also just have one minor change that I would like to address at the end, which just brought up at one of my committee meetings this morning. So I'll let it go back to you, Tony.
Okay, Ken, I got just two questions real quick, just for clarification. On the changes that are being proposed, remind me on this, because it's been a while since since we've broached this topic, but is the language here, is this consistent with 24 language or what's being proposed in the 27, or how is this?
It's, yeah, you're right. It's the 24 language that has already been approved.
Okay.
So all of the purple that's in that document is all of the 24 language that has gone through the entire code development process, and they're just waiting to print it up.
Okay, and then the second thing, and if you know about this, great. If not, no big deal. I'll look it up myself. But can you give a quick rundown of the 2018 fire in Sunrise, Arizona?
No, I
Okay.
cannot.
Perfect. I'll look that up on my own time.
Yeah.
I just know that drove a lot of this, but I'm not terribly familiar with the event other than it sounds like it was just a very difficult.
Yeah, I don't have the particulars of it. I'm just aware of the event, but I don't
Okay.
I don't feel comfortable to talk about the details of it.
Understood, Ken. Okay, thank you. All right, with that, we'll open it up to the tag or anyone else for comment or discussion. Does anyone have anything? And for tag action, just so we're all on the same page, the idea here is it sounds like there was an emergency rule to talk about, but this would be off cycle.
Yeah, yes, you're correct.
Okay. Okay, and so we would be making recommendation to the BFP if we liked it.
Yes.
Understood. Okay. Okay, anyone from the tag have any questions on this proposal? If you've had a chance to kind of look through it.
Yeah, we kind of could just run down, slowly go through, just have Ken provide some general updates what they are, so that we don't just, we've been through it rather than just assuming we've all been it.
Sure, are you good with that, Ken? Just kind of going through some.
Yeah, if you yeah, I just didn't know. That's why we were hoping some people would take the time, because I don't want to read all of the code change proposals. That's why we try to help provide the links, but I understand.
I think just provide a general summary, Ken. We don't need to every little piece,
yeah,
just go through and say what happened in 1206, what happened
yeah.
in that section. Just
Yeah, so we'll get start with the 1201 section. They just wanted to add in the electrical utility, but not in the scoping part of it. But it doesn't mean that the electrical utilities are complying with all of the fire code section. It was just a small portion of it was a requirement. So that's the reason that that was put into place, just so the fire department was aware of the installations that were going in. And there was also down here in the 1201.3 a mixed system installation, and that was just a again, I'm glad that you're doing this, Dustin. I appreciate this because I don't have all of those up in front of me. So yeah, if you can highlight that again for everybody, how you got it to pop up and show the.
Oh, no. It's
It
not
was
doing it now. There we go.
There you go. What is that? The aggregate energy. I can't. Yeah,
Let's
I'm not.
see.
I think that they're just talking about if you have you can have a energy storage system that uses more than one technology, and I think that's what they're going about there. There you go. That works. All right, so let's scroll on down and see what else we got. This was just an editorial change. Same thing there. Just renumbering. Because what happened was there was no numbering here. So we put numberings in. So that was for the gas detection and system activation sections. Again, just numbering. Okay, so 1207, this is where we get into the meat of the electrical energy storage systems. And if you see the 120711 and regarding the utilities industrial applications, and where it says it shall not apply to, and it gives specific requirements there that were needed to be laid out, that, and this information, again, this is verbatim per NFPA 855. So we were just correlating with what's in NFPA 855 here. Since we already have referenced it at the state, we wanted to make sure that we take as much language as we could from the 855 and put it in here to match what's in the 2024 IFC. Same with the mobile ESS, the 120712. These are the systems that, again, are deployed at utility substations, and just want to give some criteria for those if you run into them. In the table, there was a new technology that was been created that wasn't in the previous 2021 code, so it would have caused some conflict. So again, this is some language that came over from 855 to make sure that we captured it. So the construction document part of it, while I have you here, which I'm gonna, since we got here, I'm going to ask you to look at number 4, where it says manufacturer specification ratings and listings of each energy storage system. So there's a fire code action committee that's talking about listing versus field listing with regards to, you know, UL or Intertect. And there was just some clarifications that is being proposed for the 2027 code. Not approved yet, just being developed, but it got into a couple little bit more details. And what they're looking at doing as number 4 is adding the language where it says manufacturer specification ratings and documentation of the listings of each ESS and associated equipment. And the reasoning for that is just to, and if you can type this in, Dustin, it'd be great if you could. If you write after the word "and," write documentation of the.
Oh, it's not letting me do it on this one. You
Okay.
can open up your Word document and add it in there if you want.
Well, that's me just, well, I'll just explain it and we can go through. So it's just adding documentation of the listing. So there's actually some paperwork involved and the associated equipment after ESS, because what we're finding out is that with some of the listing processes, it's not just the entire system. It can be individual parts or associated equipment with the ESS that has to have the documentations that they're listed also. And that was some confusion that's being done in certain projects, is that they're only providing a listing for an ESS, but any associated equipment with it, they're not providing the listing. So this was just asking for additional information on any associated equipment. So that's what that section was going to be for. So that was going to be my only ask today. Number 11, go back up there, fire safety evacuation plan. That's just something new for 24, and it points us back to section 404. And then this again is just talking about, hey, plans and specifications for the ESS owned by electrical utilities shall be made available to the fire code official for viewing based on requirements of government laws and regulations. And again, this is just making sure that utility companies make the local jurisdiction aware of these being installed at their facilities. The 120714 section, we have the existing 2021 code section where it says where flammable gases can be produced under abnormal conditions. That's existing 21 amendments that we have now. The single fire area, again, just some clarification that was necessary. And then the number 5 got added in there just because of the emerging technologies, that there could be something that comes up that's not addressed, that the fire code officials says, hey, you need to provide a hazard mitigation analysis because this new technology isn't even covered in either 855 or this 1207. So it just gives the fire code official the ability to ask for that hazard mitigation analysis. Fault conditions. This was just a cleanup to just be more specific on what was being required, just getting some better language in there. And they just wanted to just simplify this area. And they just said fires involving the ESS will allow occupants of the general public to evacuate to a safe location. They just clean this up a little bit here. Again, this is just some clarification here for large scale fire test. The 15 minutes, go back up a little bit for the 15 minutes. This was a good code change that I remember talking about, because it didn't make any sense that the lessee shall immediately dispatch one or more fire mitigation personnel to the scene, and they had to make some realistic expectations, which was 15 minutes. And again, this section was put in just to allow these facilities that have these systems that they have to have somebody on site there. So when the fire department does decide to give up control of the scene, there's still somebody there to watch it. The commissioning section here, the exceptions, again, this is just, you'll see these throughout the document. This was an exception in 855 that allowed lead acid and nickel cadmium batteries with smaller sizes to be able to be installed without having to meet all of the conditions. And there it is again. The retrofit of lead acid and nickel cadmium. So this is again some clarifying language, changing out or retrofitting, and so they allowed it to be considered repair when they don't increase the size or the capacity of more than 10% of the original design. And then again, they did put in the other criteria here for the batteries and uninterrupted power supplies listed. Just trying to figure out if there's anything else. Nope, nothing else I can think of for that one. Again, this is just adding in the same additional technology that we had in the previous table. This is just the MAQ table. We just carried over the same new technologies. There's the exception again. And again, there it is. The fire detection area here. The exception, and this is for the normally unoccupied, remote standalone telecommunication structures, gross area less than 1,500 square feet. So these are our cell tower type scenarios when they have the cell towers and they're providing backup power or ESS for those. They came up with a reasonable square footage of 1,500 square feet to not have to require the detection system. If you remember in the past, if you just look at this code section without that exception, it would have been required for everything. So they decided, no, when we have this, there's no reason to have it for these type of situations. So that's why that exception was put in. Don't know the fire suppression part of it. Let's see, what did we do here? So they came up with some specific density criteria, and then it was cleaned up a little bit in the 24 code. And so they came up with a standard 0.3 GPM per square foot over the area of the room, or 2,500 square feet design, whichever was smaller. But they did allow a lower density if it was based on the large scale fire testing, which is a different requirement in section 1207. And there's our exceptions again. So this is again, the technology that was new that we had to add into this table also. So that's why you see the purple in here. This was just adding in, not just for rooms for explosion control, but the cabinets or walk-in units are also supposed to be part of that scoping of the explosion control. So this was just a cleanup. But then it also, if you scroll back up just a little bit more, I want to make sure so it had the exception for the explosion control. And if you look at exception number 3. So again, it says if you do have cabinets that did not have the debris or shrapnel ejected during a large scale fire test, then they're okay to just have those cabinets and not have to have the explosion control. And then there's also exception for the lead acid, nickel cad, cadmium systems. And yep, that's it on that section. Thanks. So this is the section for the mobile ESS. And again, the exceptions were added in based on 855 regarding the temporary usage of these at substations. So that's the reason they wanted to make sure that it was understandable that it was okay to have these in a temporary use during like power outages, or if they were working on the system and they needed to supply the watts to keep a area up and running, it was okay to do it. And then this is what I already had talked about, the 120711 section, that just to match everything that was in the IRC, with the exception of like in the spacing section here, just adding the term ESS that was added in. But and it was great if you go back to see if you remember the discussion about heat alarm, a listed heat alarm. Remember that from the IRC discussions, if anybody still remembers that, but that's the language that's actually in the residential code.
You can get those at Walmart. I don't know why they're having trouble finding them.
I don't know either. And then let's see, then a reference just in ventilation to the mechanical code. And then just go up just a little bit more, that would make sure that electrical vehicle use, that was just a terminology, detached garage or outdoors shall comply with the manufacturer specs. And then the reference standard that Dustin was just showing, that gets us to NFPA 855.23, which is referenced in 1201.1. So that's the off-cycle rule proposal, but I would love if you could take a look at that 1207.1.3, if you could show that again, Dustin, in a Word document, and we can put that language in and see if people like it or not for the construction documents. So 1207.1.3, if you can find this in a Word document.
I know Micah had his hand up and Scott's got his up. Real quick, Ken, just one technical thing that I saw. I noticed references to NFPAs and ULs that, and specifically with the ULs, I didn't see that in the currently referenced standards, some of the ULs that were referenced.
Oh, like the 9540?
Yeah, it was the.
I want to double check. Do we have something that's new that was referenced?
Yeah, I don't know if it was the 1778 and 1741. I think one of those was, and then the 9540. Yeah, the 9540 I think was the other one in the 21 that's not in there. And there's a 1974 UL. And then the ones that are existing, we would just have to add the new sections, I suppose.
Okay, so 9540 is in the 2021 now. Okay. 9540A is in the 2021 now.
So try 1778. Maybe that was the one.
1778. You are correct. We don't have a 1778. So we would need to add that in to the chapter 80 stuff.
Okay.
And So that determination is and documentation of the. And then after ESS, right, and associated equipment.
And this is proposal language from where?
This is actually through a fire code action committee meeting regarding listing versus field listing that I actually had at 7 o'clock this morning. And this is some of the language that they're looking at moving forward, but it's more of it's just cleaning things up a little bit to make people understand that please provide the associated equipment documentation for listings and not just the ESS. So if you have something attached to it during plan review, it would be appreciated.
Looks like you need a space after documentation.
Can you go to you're on the right page, 12714 number 1, where it says where ESS technology is not specifically identified in table 1207.1. Can you just scroll up to that table? Because I think it might be 12071.1. It is, it's 12071.1. So if you could make that change, so 12071.1, and then probably need to put it in purple since it's something that was not caught. Thanks. All right, I'm ready for any questions. That's all I had on this.
Okay, Micah, did you have something? I know you had your hand up for a while.
Let Scott go. I'm still trying to formulate my question a little bit.
Okay, Scott, go ahead.
I didn't know if you guys were taking questions from the public.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is Scott Lang. I'm with Honeywell, and I'm a member of UL 9540 and NFPA 855 technical committees. And I have two comments that are both related to the same thing, which is existing energy storage systems rather than new. There's a concern on the committees about systems that were installed prior to additions of the fire code that demanded greater protections, which was 2018. Systems that may not be UL 9540 listed. And so if you look at the HMA section of NFPA 855, they've added something to when an HMA is required. There's actually a couple things that were added. It's in the 2023 edition of NFPA 855. But one of them is you need to do an HMA where it's required for existing lithium ion ESS systems that are not UL 9540 listed. So that's maybe something to consider. You may want to take a look at the latest version of NFPA 855 because I think it was finished up after the 2024 IFC. So some of that stuff may not have, they don't match exactly, is what I'm trying to say. The second thing is that, and I don't know if you guys adopt chapter 11 of the fire code because it's, for existing buildings, but there's a new section 1107 that talks about the same sort of thing where, you have existing systems that are not listed. So there's some requirements in there in the 2024 IFC that talk about existing systems.
So just wanted to throw that out there.
And I'll just make a quick comment. I didn't know if we wanted to tackle existing systems or not yet. Because again, they're just getting installed and we're just still playing catch up and trying to find them in the city of Seattle right now. And so for us that didn't have any type of permitting, we're going to be calling out with these new right now, which is going to cause some concerns. But yeah, no, I understand that there is going to be some issues with the existing ones and how the AHJ tackles it, and that's just up to the tag. If you guys want to take a look at that 855 language, and see if we want to put it in the Washington State Code, which I believe, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, if do you know if that language was brought into the California adoption when they just did theirs?
Shoot, I don't know for sure, because they're actually, didn't they just adopt well, they would have just adopted the 21, so it would not be in there, I don't think, unless they would have looked ahead. I don't think they looked ahead and pulled stuff in from the 24 or the more recent version of 855. I think they just adopted 21.
My personal feeling is I like to, this is why the code change proposal looks as it is. I like to go through the code development process through ICC. And if I'm going to grab something in a future edition of a code, I feel more comfortable bringing that forward, which since I know it already went through the national process, versus taking some of the NFPA standards and trying to just plop it in here right now. I would rather go through the code development process and try to bring it forward for the 27. And if it gets put in the 27 code, then we can take a look at bringing it into our 24 code at Washington State. That would be my opinion on it.
It's, it seems like the thinking of the committee has kind of evolved on this situation. So they first thought of addressing it when they were working on the 24 IFC, and they put that new chapter 1107 to address existing systems. Then they didn't quite, exactly like the way that came out. So they looked at possibly they addressed it in the 855, the 2023, as I described, for the HMA. So they're tackling the existing that way. And then for the 27 IFC, I think they're going to point to 855 a lot, basically. So that's kind of the direction that they're going. But it's your code. So whatever you guys want to do. I just wanted to bring it up and make sure you're aware of it.
Micah, you have that stump look on your face.
I was going to ask Scott, could you repeat you said a UL standard number 855?
I mentioned UL 9540 and NFPA 855.
Okay.
Maybe I misspoke.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to ask, and you're indicating it's out of the 2023. I have another question outside of this, but and Stoyan can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure we could adopt that language without adopting the entire reference first, based on our rules for reference standards. And I don't know off the top of my head, but Stoyan maybe can jump in. Not that it's relevant, but maybe it is.
Well, if we refer to a standard, then we need to adopt the standard. But if you are using like a sentence or so from the standard, just copy paste without citing the standard, then we don't need to specifically adopt the standard. I know it's not a standard practice for ICC, and you folks are involved in the process, so you know that better than me. But
thanks. That was my curiosity. Since that's a 23 standard and it's not referenced in the 2021 code yet, and it should be in the 2024, I would assume. But thank you, Stoyan. My second question comes down to some of the language. Ken, maybe you can help with this. I know that the proposals that you provided links to is awesome. But when you put those together, some of them don't seem to function. And what I'm saying, or at least they seem very odd and awkward. When you look at 1207.1 in the exception, it says R3, R4 occupancy shall only be required to comply with section 1207.11, except where 1207.11.4 requires compliance with sections 1207.1 through 1207.9. When you go to 1207.11.4, it talks about individual and aggregate ratings. Can you tell me what an individual ESS unit is that is not currently defined and it is not proposed to be defined? So how do you know what that is?
So yes, so the simple, the simple is a Tesla Powerwall, that brand I'm going to throw out there. That would be considered an individual unit. When you start adding up individual walls, that would be considered your aggregate.
So you could have multiple walls anywhere. So pretty much if you go over 20 kWh on any individual system, so you'd have to have, then you're going to get kicked into meeting all those other requirements. So the exception, I guess I don't understand the exception and how you get here with this, since that, I mean, you understand that as an individual unit, but that's not defined anywhere.
Well,
and this is a separate term that talks about the ratings of those units. And you have, I mean, I think there's what, 6 other energy storage system definitions in the current.
So maybe, so maybe you also need to be asking the IRC. This is verbatim out of the 2021 IRC, which we already adopted at the state. Verbatim.
I agree.
So, but that's the understanding what
But
this
you're
is like.
changing.
So I'm not changing
Aren't you
anything at the
changing-
IRC.
Are you changing something at 1207.1 though? You're bringing in a change in 1207.1, which points you to 1207.11.4. So that would be the change. And to provide clarity on 1207.1, when it kicks you back up to meeting these requirements from 1207.11.4, how do you know when that triggers that based off of the information in 1207.11.4? I'm just curious. It's very awkward, Ken, when you're talking about what the language is in 1207.1 exception.
Okay. So let's start with the 1207.1 exception. So
that's your new language, correct?
The base code language said ESS in group R3 and R4 occupancy shall comply with section 1207.11. You go back down to 1207.11, and that's what we were just talking about. So it just said automatically you had to comply with all of the 1207.11 requirements. There was no exceptions before. So now let's go back up to 1207.1. So the language where it says it says only be required to comply with that section, except, and believe me, the language is fun, except where 1207.11.4 requires compliance with the sections listed below 1207.1, and that's just if the aggregate quantities are over that 80 kilowatt hours, which would be multiple power walls being installed that are over that 80 kilowatt hours. Then nope, sorry, you have to go back to the 1207.1 through 1207.9 requirements. You don't stay in 1207.11.
So when you're in 1207.11.4, where are you getting 80 kilowatt hours?
Let's go back down there. The very
Because
at the
according
very
to 1207, go ahead.
So at the very bottom, where it says ESA installations exceeding the
permitted individual
or
which is
aggregate
20.
or aggregate ratings shall be installed
Either
in
one.
accordance with.
Right. So if you exceed the individual at 20 kWh, you got to comply with the rest of those sections. That's where I'm struggling with this. It seems you don't get an exception at all. I mean, your individual system, just if you put an individual maximum rated 20 kWh in a closet, you can only have 20 kWh. If you exceed that at all, you got to go and comply with all the rest of the sections of the code.
They don't make them larger than 20. That's the individual units are pretty much limited to 20 because of this. So if you just have one,
and okay.
Yeah, I'm
Again, where do we see that?
I'm trying to pull something else up here. Hold on a second.
Anyway, it just seems to be questioning and kind of reading the language. It's very cumbersome in 1207.1, and then it doesn't make any sense when you get to 1207.11.4. It seems very, very burdensome for R3 and R4s at that level. Thanks for letting me speak. I know I'm not on the IFC tag.
Well, you're not on the IFC tag, but you are an IRC, right?
Yeah, true.
So then why didn't you catch this on the IRC when you're reviewing the 2021 code?
I don't know. Maybe I just didn't. I don't think, did we have the 1207.1 language in the IRC section?
Yes, R328.5. R328.5 has the exact same language. It says ESS installations exceeding the permitted individual or aggregate rating shall be installed in accordance with section 1207 of the International Fire Code. It's this exact same language in it, and the same verbatim language in R328.5.
I see that. It's sent you to 1207, which gives you and now you're adding to 1207 with new language in purple. Is that correct or not?
Okay, so 1207.11 again matches R328. And I understand that 1207.
I'm talking about 1207.1.
Yep.
And the exception there that's being modified.
Let me go back to 1207. I'm sorry, I'm popping up other documents.
And again, I may be reading it incorrectly, but it seems like that has some concerns. And I need to pull up the R. You said R330.
Yeah.
What? I know that.
Yeah. So 1207.1. The only change I'm making is this adding the words only be required to comply with 1207.11. But 1207.11 tells you if you exceed those quantities, you have to go back to 1207. 1207.11 says you have to go back into 1207 if you're above those amounts. And that means, hey, guess what? Now you have to comply with the entire provisions of 1207.1.
I'm not running the meeting, but Jen has her hand up.
I mean, I just want to say I also find that first part difficult to follow because it's like an exception within an exception. You know, it's like a double negative almost. So for some people's brains, that's just hard. And I'm one of those people.
No, I get it. I didn't create the language. I'm just copying it over from the 24.
I know, but we can definitely make it better, Ken.
No, we can make our 1207.1 better, but I don't think what we can, I wouldn't want to tackle the 1207.11 since it's matching the R328.5. Unless that's something that the committee wants to do. Yeah. So any other thoughts on maybe changes to 1207.1?
And I'm sorry, can you repeat the R section that points you back to chapter 12 of the fire?
I'm looking at the 2021 International Residential Code, R328.5.
Okay, thank you. If you're asking me to do that on the fly, I agree with what's in 328.5. It points you to 1207, but I don't agree with the changes you're making to 1207.1. Regardless of, I mean, that says it points you to the entire section of 1207, which I'm not disputing that that's the right pointer. I'm disputing the changes you're making, and I'm concerned. I'm not disputing. I'm concerned about the changes you're making to 1207.1 and the usability of that, and how that then ties into 1207.11.4. And it's just not very clear.
So, but if R3 and R4 have to comply with 1207.11 and 1207.11.4 is a subsection, then you already get it. I don't think you need to call it out specifically because that's already in 1207.11, right? So I think you're just specifying like, okay, everything has to comply with all this except R3 and R4 only have to comply with this one section. Because you get all the subsections within it for free.
So I do have the proposal that Ken's pulling that from up on screen at the moment.
So I think you can just strike the second exception entirely. So you would end the sentence at 1207.11. And now once they're in there and they're reading through the details, then they're going to have that size limitation.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Fine with me.
So in 1207,
It gets you to the same place.
so you want to strike the second sentence of this exception in 1207.1?
Striking after 1207.11, right? You want to accept the strike except no. Go back where you were. I think you want to strike the except where section 1207.11.4 requires compliance. Do you want to strike all of that? Was that what you were just
That's
saying?
that's my suggestion, because you get those subsections within.
Yep, that works.
Okay, Storian, go ahead.
I have a question for Ken. So we have, and I'm not a member right now of either committee, but currently we have sections from 2021 International Residential Code, and we have proposed language from 2024 International Fire Code. And I was wondering, Ken, if you compare 2024 International Residential Code, and do you know if the language will align?
No, I have not looked at the 2024 International Residential Code. I was only making amendments to our 2021 fire code using 2021 residential code. And the reason being is I was instructed really not to mess with the residential code. And I didn't want to make any proposed changes to the residential code. So I was afraid if I did dive in and start seeing differences that I would have to bring them forward. And so I did not. I was going to wait for the next code cycle to take a look at the 24 residential code.
Okay, Chris, go ahead.
I think we would also get rid of the words only be required to in that section. We want compliance with 1207.11 and those sections that it points you to from within that section as they apply. Yeah, like that, I think.
Oh, well, I see the reasoning behind the original language, though.
Yeah, I understand the reasoning, but it puts us in it creates a circular loop of confusion with if one of those sections, as I forget who pointed it out, gets you to those other sections that if there are sections in 1207.11 that point other places in the code, when you exceed those thresholds, if we use the words only be required to,
I got you.
I get in a circular loop.
I follow you, Chris.
Cool.
Okay. Okay. Where's that leave us?
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, I suppose we could alternatively, for clarity, those sections that kick you out of that 1207.11 are based on quantities, right? So alternatively, we'd say exception stuff in R3 and R4 below the thresholds outlined in point 2 section or table shall comply with 1207.11. We could put that in the exception, those limitations in size, capacity. If that's more clear language.
So ESS and group R3 and R4 occupancies.
Less than whatever kilowatt hours it's supposed to be. And then you could put back in the only be required to comply with part at that point, I think.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Maybe that's clearer. I don't know.
I like that.
I would probably say, I don't know if does the table speak to aggregate quantities? Because like you're saying, Ken, it's when I get 4 Tesla walls, it's a problem. Just making sure that language, you know, captures that we're talking about aggregate quantities.
So you're talking about, Dustin just added in there, thresholds in section 1207.14? Is that the correct?
So I got the wrong code reference in there, but
okay.
1207.11.4 is what it should be. If they're below the thresholds in this section, then they shall comply with sections 1207.1 through 1207.9 is what I believe the intent is there.
I would say not exceeding
Not
those
exceeding.
thresholds.
Yeah.
Well, not the word, sorry, just not exceeding instead of, yeah. instead of below, because then you'd have to be below those.
So now I'm a little confused what it's going to say for an exception.
Okay, so, and then, Chris, do you think we should put back in, and Jen, do you think we should put back in the only to be required?
I think at this point you could, yes. And
So none of those other subsections apply. So not 1207.11.1.2. It's only that one individual section.
no, it would be all of 1207.11. I think written this way, I think the intent is that you're not applying the rest of 1207. You're only applying 1207.11.
I think it reads that
Yeah.
way already. If you start at the beginning and read through the exception, right? Because you're saying this applies to everything except in R3 and R3 complies with this one section.
I think you get there too.
Yeah,
If we
I think
wanted
it's
to,
redundant. If you're going to say only, then I would just suggest that you do sections 1207.11 through
sure,
whatever that last one is, just so it's clear it's
Fair.
all of them. Yeah.
if whether or not that's necessary is a question of clarity to the AHJs out there. I don't know.
I can
would
see
get how that
people.
reads,
I can see
but-
people reading the only and saying,
Yeah.
were they trying to make the distinction? It's only that one section and not the other ones.
Yeah.
All right, I like it. That makes sense now.
Yeah, right there. So be with sections 1207.11 and then through. Oh, it's not crossed out. Okay, sorry. It looked, I couldn't tell if it was crossed out. Perfect. Got it now.
I think it still reads a little funky, leaving this last tail right here. So ESS in groups R3 and R4 occupancies not exceeding those thresholds in 1207.11.4 shall comply with sections 1207.11.
And then you're
If
gonna
they
say through-
exceed, then they do 1207.1.
Yeah, no, you're gonna stop it. They'll comply with sections 1207.11 through, and then we're gonna scroll down to the end of 1207.11 and see what that last section is in there.
The 12, so
Keep scrolling down.
this one right here, below number
Keeps-
4.
Till it becomes 1207.12.
Oh, gotcha.
So it's through 9.
1207.11.9.
Yep. And we don't need the .1 there at the beginning. It's just 1207.11. Like the beginning of the section through the end of the section. I think that is the merging of all the thoughts.
And then this last tail that I don't have stricken through should be
Drops
stricken
off.
through.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Okay. What's next?
I'd like to make a motion unless there's any more
Okay.
discussion.
Go for it, Jen.
I'd like to make a motion to approve this, and I'll make sure I got this right with the right language. Is it considered an off-cycle rule?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to propose this off-cycle rule to chapter 12 as presented today with the following changes that just occurred in 1207.1. And move it, and I'm not too sure, Dustin and Storian, are we moving this to the BFP?
The next step is the BFP committee.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so just add that on, that be moving it on to the BFP.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
It's Chris, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ken, would you like to speak to your motion?
I think we discussed it enough for an hour and 10 minutes.
Agreed.
Who was our second on that?
Chris Seaman. Chris, would you like to speak to your second?
Nope, I'm with Ken on that one.
All right, any other further discussion?
Oh, no, yes, I'm sorry. Did you capture in that additional language? I just want to make sure the changes, not only did we make to 1207.1, but if you scroll down to the
These
construction,
ones?
yes, also in 12.
And then the
Yeah,
table right here.
got it. Okay, just those additional changes also. All right, thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay.
Yes, to clarify, my second includes what Ken just remembered to include.
Excellent. Okay, sounds good. And with that, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any against? Okay, motion carries. Okay.
Can I add something here? Just
Yes.
Very quick. So we will have the same language for the BFP committee, and we will have the same proposal with the on-site comments for the council for potential direction. I'm just trying to clarify the procedure. Direction for the council staff to file the CR 102, but we will need some help from Ken for the CR 102. So Ken, you're not off the hook.
No, that's fine. I started this ball rolling. I'll be happy to help you finish it.
Yeah, it's the rationale that we need to add to the CR 102, and we need to discuss the cost benefit analysis a little bit.
Got it. Well, I'll do everything I can to help.
Okay, excellent.
And then Tony, I got a favor. I had brought up the 2021 insert pages before the emergency amendment. Is it possible we can talk about the insert pages quickly, because I'm the one that brought it up, and with all of Dustin's help today, I would like to just make a comment on that first, if that's possible, since we only have a few minutes left.
Yes, that's next on the agenda. If we don't have
Okay, because it's not on the agenda is that we really need to deal with the emergency rule 855, make sure
gotcha. Okay.
everybody's got that clear. But so to do with the 2021, so Dustin Stoyan, I had started going through the 2021 insert pages and found, and I'm not even done yet, over 26 correlation issues between the fire code and building code insert pages. And I didn't want to call out each individual one in this meeting because it was going to take forever. So I was hoping that we could set up some time so I could show you all of the different ones that I have found that wasn't correlated. There were some errors, and just work with you on those insert pages. And my ask is that you guys pull those insert pages off, because there's so many mistakes with correlation between the building code and fire code and other issues. But I did not want to take the time to go through each list. I have 3 pages of them right now, that just things that need to get tuned up. And I'm hoping that we can just work separately on that, if that's possible.
It is, but I was clear at the council meeting that we weren't ready with the insert pages because there are some errata items that we needed to take care of. However, the council required us to post the insert pages, so they are posted. The thing with the correlation is some of these correlation issues we can take care of with the expedite rulemaking, but others they will need a regular rulemaking off cycle, or whatever regular because they kind of changed the regulatory effect, or the council didn't consider those. And the reason for this is in Washington state, we don't have very many states like that, but we have building code, residential code, and mechanical, and the fire code is in the 4th place. So we don't go to the more restrictive, we go to the list from top to bottom. So we can talk. I can clarify further that.
Okay, yeah, I just think it would be correct to just try to match up some of these. I mean, just some of it just doesn't make sense, and I'm afraid that somebody's going to start using these insert pages right now. And as you mentioned, you were told to get them up on the website. I just don't think the council's intention was to get something up on the website that might not have been correlated yet.
Well, I think I was clear, and Dustin further asked the same question. Do you want us to post the insert pages without the errata? And as far as I remember, that was the answer, and we did.
Well, I
But
think
I have to admit that there are very many mistakes, not only in the fire codes, in other codes as well. And again, we can't fix them right away. We need an expedite rulemaking, and we are working on it. But
Well, some of them are just clerical issues that just didn't get caught from, just didn't get caught. So, but I don't want to take the time to go through all of them. So I would love to be able to just show you my list when we get a chance on the side.
Do you think you
Send
could
us the
email
list
it
or
to
we-
us so we can start looking at it?
yeah,
Yeah, no, I can, yeah, I'm actually taking the document in Word and trying to show the differences.
we are planning to submit the expedite rule. My personal goal is by the end of next week. So if you send us the list, and we can add, the easy stuff to our documents, and then also we can meet and discuss the ones
Got it.
that are difficult.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, that means, yeah, I'll just finish it up. I'm almost through chapter 10. And I got 26 so far.
all right, that sounds good. That'll get that moving. Okay, and did you say there was something else, Ken, that you were?
Yeah, so the issue right now is NFPA 855. We amended the 2018 code with an emergency rule to reference 855. That expires here in a few days. And the goal was that the council was going to extend it up until July 1. But we need another, we need it to be extended, and that's why I lean towards Stoyan and to help us out to figure out what needs to get done, since this is going to expire, so we have it for the 2018. And then second, we need another emergency rule to apply to the 2021 because we need to reference NFPA 855 in the 2021 until these off-cycle rules hopefully get approved that we just approved for chapter 12. If that makes sense.
Yes, and I know when I said it doesn't make sense to you, but we have to comply with the requirements that the code advisor's office has, and we were having issues even with the filing the NFPA, the first emergency in 2018 codes, because for the code revisor's office, 2018 and 2021 code doesn't exist. They pay attention on what was adopted, and the currently adopted language is 2021 code. So we will, actually, we don't need to ask the council for that, but we can on the meeting next week, because the expiration date is May 25th. So we will readopt the NFPA reference standard. This is the easy part, and we will have an expiration date June 30th, and effective July 1st we will try to figure out a way to make the emergency rule for July 21st, but we don't have a solution on that yet. We are planning to have a council meeting at the end of June 30th, if we can achieve the quorum, because we will need a council vote for the R4 adoption, so we can add this emergency rule for 2021 fire code to the agenda.
Okay, is there tag action on this today?
No, we don't need to take action on this.
Okay. And it'll be on the agenda for the 19th for council.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Sounds good. Anything further on that, Ken? No.
Nope, thanks.
I can't tell if we bounce back to 3B on that or not. I think we did, but I don't think that there's anything else on the agenda to cover. Is that accurate? I think the IFC insert pages were discussed. Dustin, I have one thing on the insert pages I'll send you.
Okay.
You know, the certifications for the alternate fire extinguishing system? I thought in the CR 103, it says effective date, July 1, 24, we were gonna give an extra year. It doesn't show up on the insert page, as the effective date.
I'll double check that. All the language was taken off of what was published by the register. I'll double check versus the CR 103 and I'll just clarify and make sure. And if it's not, and we need to give them the extra time, we can kind of incorporate that into some of the other stuff.
I
we're
think
working
that was
against.
council action on that, is to give the extra year on the alternate fire extinguishing.
No, it was, that's one of the ones that I caught also.
Okay.
But
okay.
what we forgot, what's not in there is the existing language needs to stay. So we have existing WAC language that's good until, so we still have that existing WAC language that really needs to stay for those certifications. Otherwise, we have nothing.
Got it. Okay. Well, you're on it, Ken. As long as it's on your list, I know you're going to coordinate with staff, and if we need to have a meeting on that later, we can.
Okay.
I'll make myself available.
The WABU volunteers also cut more than 20. For some reason, I don't know why the fire code, but it seems to be the problematic one for this code cycle.
Okay.
And we also cut a few. So now is the time. Again, I want to push and file it by the end of next week, because we will need at least 45 days to wait at least 45 days, and we're getting late with that, but we keep getting new errors, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Well, I'll leave that alone then. All right. With that, I think that concludes agenda item 3 and 4. Do we have anything for other business? Okay. Very good. Well, thank you everyone for your time and for participating. And I guess our next meeting will be on the 19th for State Building Code Council. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
You adjourn.
Thanks.